She stood in the shadows of London's most glittering ballroom, watching the man she was supposed to marry kiss her best friend like the world didn't exist. One moment, one choice, and Lillian Carter's entire future collapsed into ash. They called her weak, disposable, a woman whose only value was the arrangement her family made for her. But before the sun rose on that spring night in 1847, she would make a decision so dangerous, so unthinkable, that it would flip the entire social order on its head and prove every single one of them dead wrong. If you want to know how a discarded fiancé became the most powerful woman in London, stay until the end. Drop a like and comment what city you're watching from. Let's begin. The ballroom glittered like a jewel box turned inside out, chandeliers dripping with crystal, walls lined in silk the color of champagne, and everywhere, the rustle of satin and the clink of champagne flutes. It was the Harringtons' annual spring ball, the event that opened the season, and every powerful family in London had turned out in full force. Lillian Carter stood near the edge of the dance floor, her gloved hands clasped in front of her, watching the swirl of bodies move in perfect rhythm. She wore a gown of pale blue silk, modest but beautiful, the kind of dress that whispered rather than shouted. Her dark hair was pinned in soft curls, a single strand of pearls at her throat. Her mother's, passed down with the quiet instruction to wear them well tonight. Tonight mattered. Tonight, her engagement to William Ashford, eldest son of the Ashford banking empire, would be quietly, informally announced. No grand spectacle, just whispers among the right families, nods of approval, the slow solidification of a future already decided. She should have felt relief, security. Her family's debts would be cleared, her younger sisters would have dowries, her father's name would be safe. Instead, she felt like a bird in a gilded cage, watching the door swing shut. Lillian. She turned. Her mother appeared at her side, sharp-eyed and elegant in deep burgundy. "Where is William?" "I'm not sure," Lillian said. "I haven't seen him in nearly half an hour." Her mother's mouth tightened. "You should be with him, visible, together. People are watching." "I know." "Then go find him." It wasn't a suggestion. Lillian nodded and slipped away, weaving through clusters of conversation, smiling politely when she needed to, keeping her eyes moving. William was tall, easy to spot in a crowd, but as she scanned the room, she didn't see his familiar profile anywhere. She checked the card room, empty save for a few older men smoking cigars. She checked the terrace, a handful of couples murmuring in low tones, but no William. Then she saw Clara Whitmore, her closest friend since childhood, the girl who had held her hand through every scraped knee and whispered secret. Clara, in a dress of rose silk, standing near the hallway that led to the private drawing rooms. Clara, glancing over her shoulder like she was checking to see if anyone was watching. Lillian frowned and followed. The hallway was quieter, dimly lit, the sounds of the ball muffled behind heavy doors. Clara moved quickly, her skirts whispering against the floor, and Lillian kept her distance, a strange unease curling in her chest. Clara stopped in front of a door at the end of the hall. She knocked twice, softly. The door opened, and William Ashford stepped out. Lillian froze. For a single disorienting moment, relief flooded through her. There he was. She'd found him. She could go back to her mother and... Then William smiled. Not the polite, measured smile he gave in public. Not the careful expression he wore when he took her hand at dinners and balls. This smile was warm, real. And it wasn't for Lillian. He reached out, pulled Clara inside, and closed the door behind them. Lillian's breath caught in her throat. No. She stood there, rooted to the floor, her mind racing to make sense of what she'd just seen. There had to be an explanation, a reason. William wouldn't, Clara wouldn't. But even as she thought it, she knew. She knew. Her hands trembled as she stepped forward. She didn't knock. She didn't announce herself. She simply turned the handle and pushed the door open. The scene inside burned itself into her memory in excruciating detail. William and Clara, standing too close, his hand at her waist. Her fingers curled into the lapel of his coat, their faces inches apart, words dying on their lips as they turned toward the sound of the door. Clara's eyes went wide. "Lillian." "Don't." Lillian's voice came out steady, cold. She didn't recognize it as her own. William stepped back, smoothing his jacket, his expression shifting into something carefully neutral. Lillian, this isn't... How long? Silence. How long, William? He hesitated. Then, with the air of a man resigning himself to an inconvenience, he said, 4 months. 4 months. Lillian felt the floor tilt beneath her. 4 months of stolen moments. 4 months of lies. 4 months while she'd sat across from him at dinners, while he'd held her hand in carriages, while her mother had smiled and her father had shaken his hand, and the whole machinery of their engagement had ground forward, unstoppable. Lillian, please, Clara whispered, stepping forward. Let me explain. You were my friend. Clara flinched. I didn't mean for this to happen. I tried to... To what? Stop yourself? Lillian's voice cracked, the ice breaking. To tell me? To do the right thing? It's not that simple. It is exactly that simple. William raised a hand, his tone shifting into something sharper. Lillian, control yourself. This is neither the time nor the place for hysterics. She stared at him. Hysterics. Yes, you're upset, understandably, but we can discuss this rationally. You've been sleeping with my best friend for 4 months while planning to marry me, and you think I'm being irrational. His jaw tightened. Lower your voice. Why? Are you afraid someone will hear? I'm afraid you'll embarrass yourself further. The words hit like a slap. Lillian took a step back, her vision blurring. She looked at Clara, who stood there pale and trembling, tears streaming down her face. She looked at William, whose expression had settled into cold irritation, like she was an inconvenience to be managed. And she realized with brutal clarity that neither of them cared. Not about her feelings, not about the betrayal, not about anything except the fact that she'd discovered it. You were going to marry me anyway, she said slowly. Weren't you? William didn't answer. You were going to marry me, take my family's gratitude and my father's business connections, and keep Clara on the side, like a mistress. Lillian, answer me. He exhaled, his patience clearly fraying. It's a practical arrangement. Your family needs the alliance. Mine needs the respectability. What I do in private is my own concern. Her hands curled into fists. And what about me? You would have been well cared for, comfortable, respected. Respected, she repeated, the word bitter on her tongue. Yes, as long as you played your part. The cruelty of it, the sheer, calculated cruelty, stole the breath from her lungs. Clara stepped forward, her voice breaking. Lillian, if you would just listen. Listen to what? More lies? Lillian's voice rose, trembling with fury. You stood beside me at my mother's funeral. You held my hand when I was terrified about this engagement. You looked me in the eye every single day and lied. I never wanted to hurt you, but you did it anyway. William's expression hardened. Enough of this melodrama. You're making a scene. A scene? Lillian laughed, the sound sharp and brittle. You haven't seen a scene yet. She turned toward the door. Where are you going? William's voice carried a warning edge. Away from you. If you walk out that door, there will be consequences. She stopped, her hand on the doorknob, and looked back at him. Is that a threat? It's a fact. You think you're angry now? Wait until your family loses everything because you couldn't keep your emotions in check. My emotions? The words came out as a whisper. You destroyed my life and you're blaming my emotions? I'm trying to salvage what's left of this disaster, he snapped. If you would just calm down and think rationally. I am thinking rationally. And what I'm thinking is that I would rather starve in the streets than spend one more second in your presence. Clara gasped. Lillian, you don't mean that. Don't I? She yanked the door open. Watch me. And she walked out. Behind her, Clara's sobs echoed down the hallway. William's voice rose, sharp and commanding. Lillian, get back here. Do you hear me? Get back here. She didn't stop, didn't slow, didn't look back. She walked down the hallway, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. The ballroom loomed ahead, brilliant and beautiful and absolutely terrifying. Every instinct screamed at her to find a side door, to slip out quietly, to hide. But she was so tired of hiding, so tired of being small and quiet and grateful for scraps of respect. She stepped into the ballroom. The music didn't stop. The dancers kept dancing, but she felt the shift, the subtle turn of heads, the way conversations faltered mid-sentence, the ripple of attention spreading outward like a stone dropped in still water. Her mother appeared from the crowd, her face a mask of forced calm. "Lillian, where have you been?" "Finding the truth." Her mother's eyes widened in alarm. "What are you talking about?" "William and Clara have been having an affair for 4 months." The words fell into the space between them like an explosion. Her mother's face went white. That's impossible. You must be mistaken." "I saw them, together. He admitted it." "Lower your voice," her mother hissed, gripping her arm. "People are starting to stare. Let them stare. Lillian, please, think about your sisters. Think about your father. I have been thinking about them. For months. Every single day. And do you know what I just realized?" Lillian pulled her arm free. "It doesn't matter how perfect I am, how obedient, how grateful. They'll still treat me like property." "That's not true." "It is. You know it is. William just told me to my face that what he does in private is none of my concern, that as long as I played my part, I'd be comfortable." Her mother's expression flickered, just for a moment, with something that looked like recognition, like pain, but then it hardened again. "Life isn't fair, Lillian, especially not for women. We do what we must to survive." "Then I'd rather not survive like this." She turned away before her mother could respond, pushing through the crowd toward the front entrance. People moved aside, their expressions ranging from shock to pity to barely concealed glee. The Carter girl, they'd say tomorrow, lost her mind at the Harrington ball, accused her fiancé of infidelity, made a complete spectacle of herself. Poor thing. Damaged goods, ruined. Lillian burst through the front doors and into the cold spring night, gasping for air like a drowning woman breaking the surface. The marble steps stretched out before her, leading down to the street where carriages waited in neat rows. She could leave. Right now. Just walk away and never look back. But where would she go? Home. Where her father would rage and her mother would weep and her sisters would stare at her with terrified eyes? To a hotel. With what money? The few coins in her reticule? To a friend's house? She had no friends. Clara had been the only one who mattered, and Clara had... A sob tore from her throat, raw and desperate. She sank down onto the steps, her beautiful blue gown pooling around her like water, and pressed her hands to her face. What had she done? She'd walked out. In front of everyone. Accused William publicly. Destroyed any chance of salvaging the arrangement. By tomorrow morning, her family would be finished. Her father's creditors would call in their debts. Her sisters would have no prospects. And she would be the girl who ruined everything. The girl who couldn't keep her mouth shut. The girl who let her emotions destroy her family's one chance at survival. Another sob shook her shoulders. Then another. She'd tried so hard to be good. To be obedient. To be the perfect daughter. The perfect fiancé. The perfect pawn in everyone else's games. And it hadn't mattered. Nothing she did would ever be enough. "Excuse me." The voice came from behind her. Low, measured, unmistakably male. Lillian stiffened and wiped at her eyes, trying to compose herself. She turned. A man stood at the top of the steps, silhouetted against the light spilling from the doorway. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in impeccable black evening clothes. He descended 2 steps and the light caught his face. Lillian's breath hitched. She knew who he was. Everyone in London knew who he was. Adrian Blackthorne, the Duke of Ashford. 32 years old, impossibly wealthy, and so powerful that even the Queen deferred to him in certain matters. He was known for 3 things: his brilliance in business, his absolute refusal to marry, and his complete disinterest in society's games. He was also, she realized with a sinking feeling, William's cousin. Of course the universe would send the one person guaranteed to make this night even worse. "I apologize for intruding," he said, his voice calm and precise. "But I couldn't help noticing you seemed distressed." Lillian stood quickly, brushing at her skirts, panic flooding through her. "I'm fine." "You're crying on the steps of the Harrington mansion at the height of the season's opening ball." He tilted his head slightly. "Forgive me, but that doesn't suggest fine." "It's none of your concern." "Perhaps not. But I saw you leave, alone, without your fiancé. Her stomach dropped. I don't... And I saw my cousin follow you into a private hallway 20 minutes ago with Miss Whitmore. Lillian froze. He knew. She swallowed hard. I don't know what you think you saw, but I think, he said quietly, that you discovered something tonight that you were never supposed to know. The gentleness in his voice, the complete lack of judgment, broke something inside her. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. She turned away, humiliated. It doesn't matter. Doesn't it? No, because by tomorrow I'll be the scandal. Not him, not her, me. He was silent for a moment, then, you're right. The blunt confirmation was somehow worse than pity would have been. They'll say you're jealous, he continued, his tone matter-of-fact, hysterical, that you threw a tantrum because you couldn't handle a man's natural appetites. Please stop. They'll say you're damaged goods, that no respectable man will have you now, that you should have kept quiet, accepted your place, been grateful. I said stop, but, he said, his tone shifting, becoming something sharper, they won't say any of that if you walk back in there with me. Lillian turned to face him, confusion cutting through her misery. What? Adrian Blackthorne descended the final steps until he was standing directly in front of her. This close, she could see the sharp intelligence in his eyes, the controlled power in the way he held himself. And something else, something that looked almost like fury. Walk back into that ballroom, he said. On my arm. Let me be seen showing interest in you, publicly. Her heart hammered against her ribs. You can't be serious. I assure you I am entirely serious. Why would you do that? I'm nobody. I have no money, no connections, no... You have courage. He said it like a simple fact. And you just did something I've never seen anyone do at one of these wretched affairs. What? Have a complete breakdown on the front steps? Refused to accept humiliation quietly. She stared at him, trying to understand. But you're his cousin. It would cause a scandal. Good. The word hung in the air between them. I don't understand, Lillian whispered. Adrian's expression hardened. My cousin is a liar, a manipulator, and a predator. He's destroyed 3 women's reputations that I know of, possibly more. And every single time, society blamed the women. Called them hysterical, damaged, unworthy. And you want to help me because I'm tired of watching him win. His voice was cold, precise. And because you deserve better than to be his next victim. Lillian's breath caught. I can't ask you to... You're not asking, I'm offering. He extended his arm. The choice is yours, Miss Carter. You can walk back in there with me and change the narrative entirely. Or you can leave and let them destroy you in comfort. Her mind raced. It was insane, reckless, a gamble that could backfire spectacularly. The Duke of Ashford didn't show interest in anyone. If he suddenly appeared with her on his arm, the entire ballroom would erupt in speculation. But that was the point, wasn't it? If Adrian Blackthorne, the most powerful unmarried man in England, chose to single her out, no one would dare call her damaged goods. They wouldn't be able to. What do you get out of this? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. A faint, cold smile touched his lips. The satisfaction of watching William squirm. It wasn't a full answer. She knew that. But standing there, with the cold night air biting at her skin and the ruins of her future scattered at her feet, she realized something. She had nothing left to lose. And if she was going to go down, she might as well go down fighting. She took a shaky breath and placed her hand on his arm. The fabric of his coat was fine wool, and beneath it she could feel the solid strength of muscle. All right, she whispered. Let's give them something to talk about. One. The warmth of the ballroom hit her like a wave as they stepped back inside. For a moment, Lillian's courage faltered. Every eye in the room would be on them. Every whisper would be about her. But Adrian's arm was steady beneath her hand, and he moved with the kind of absolute confidence that came from never having doubted his place in the world. Remember, he murmured, so quietly that only she could hear. You have nothing to be ashamed of. He does. She nodded, her throat too tight to speak. They paused at the top of the 3 shallow steps that led down into the main ballroom. The music was still playing, a waltz, light and airy. But as they stood there, perfectly framed in the doorway, the music began to falter. One violin dropped out, then another. Conversations died mid-sentence. Dancers slowed, then stopped. And in the space of perhaps 10 seconds, the entire ballroom fell into absolute stunned silence. Lillian felt 300 pairs of eyes land on her like physical weight. Her instinct was to shrink, to apologize, to run. But Adrian's hand covered hers where it rested on his arm, warm, steady, anchoring her, and he led her down the steps with the calm authority of a man who had never once questioned his right to do exactly as he pleased. The crowd parted before them like water. Lillian kept her chin up, her expression carefully neutral, even as her heart threatened to hammer its way out of her chest. She could see the shock on people's faces, the confusion, the rapidly calculating expressions as they tried to make sense of what they were seeing. The Duke of Ashford, who hadn't shown interest in a woman in over a decade, walking into the Harrington ball with Lillian Carter on his arm. The same Lillian Carter who had just been publicly engaged to his cousin. Across the room she saw her mother frozen in conversation with Lady Pemberton, her face pale with shock. She saw Clara, standing near the refreshment table, her eyes wide and red-rimmed, and then she saw William. He stood near the center of the ballroom, surrounded by a cluster of young men from the banking district. His expression when he caught sight of her was priceless, shock giving way to confusion, giving way to something that looked dangerously close to rage. He started toward them. "Your Grace," William said, his voice tight. "I wasn't aware you'd be attending tonight." "Last-minute decision," Adrian replied, his tone pleasant. "I'm fortunate I came. I would have hated to miss the opportunity to become better acquainted with Miss Carter." William's jaw clenched. "Miss Carter is my fiancé." "Is she?" Adrian's tone was mild, but there was steel underneath. "How strange. She gave me the impression that arrangement was no longer viable." A ripple of whispers spread outward from where they stood. William's face flushed. "There's been a misunderstanding, nothing that can't be resolved privately." "I don't think Miss Carter is interested in resolving anything with you," Adrian said. "Are you Miss Carter?" Every eye in the room fixed on her. This was it, the moment that would define everything that came after. She could back down, apologize, say it had all been a terrible mistake, or she could burn it all down. Lillian lifted her chin and met William's eyes. "No, I'm not." The whispers exploded into a roar of speculation. William stepped closer, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "You're making a mistake. You have no idea what you're doing." "I know exactly what I'm doing." Her voice was steady, clear. "I'm choosing not to marry a liar." His expression turned vicious. "You think he's going to save you? The Duke of Ashford?" He laughed, the sound bitter. "He's using you to get at me. The moment this little game is over, he'll drop you like everyone else." "Perhaps," Lillian said, "but at least he's been honest about it." William recoiled as if she'd slapped him. Adrian's hand tightened fractionally on hers. "I think this conversation is over. Come, Miss Carter. I believe they're about to start the next waltz." He led her away, leaving William standing in the middle of the ballroom with 200 witnesses to his humiliation. The orchestra, sensing the need to fill the terrible silence, launched into a new piece. A waltz, as Adrian had predicted. He turned to face her, one hand at her waist, the other taking her gloved hand in his. "Can you dance?" "Yes." "Then dance with me. And don't look at him. Look at me." She did. And as they swept into the waltz, the rest of the ballroom fell away. Lillian had danced before, of course, at dozens of balls and parties, but never like this. Adrian moved with absolute precision, guiding her through the steps with an ease that made it feel effortless. "You're doing well," he murmured. "I'm terrified." "Good. Use it. Let them see that you're not broken, that you're strong." "I don't feel strong." "You walked away from a man who tried to control you. You faced down a ballroom full of vultures. You're stronger than you think." She wanted to believe him, but her hands were shaking, and she could feel the weight of 300 stares pressing down on her like a physical thing. "What happens now?" she whispered. "Now we dance. And tomorrow we begin the real work." "What work?" He smiled, a cold, calculated expression, making sure William Ashford never harms another woman again. The waltz spun on, and Lillian let herself be carried by the music, by Adrian's steady guidance, by the strange, reckless courage that had taken root in her chest. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid of it. The rest of the ball passed in a blur. Adrian danced with her twice more, an almost unheard-of breach of etiquette that set the gossips buzzing. Between dances, he introduced her to his circle, lords and ladies who normally wouldn't have given her a second glance, but who now treated her with cautious respect because he had chosen to single her out. Her mother tried to approach her 3 times. Each time, Adrian smoothly intercepted, deflecting with polite but firm refusals. Clara attempted once to pull her aside. Lillian simply turned away. And William watched from across the room, his expression growing darker with each passing hour. Finally, near midnight, Adrian escorted her toward the entrance. "You're leaving?" she asked, surprised. "We're leaving," he corrected. "You've made your point. Staying longer would be excessive." He was right. She'd already given them more than enough to talk about. They descended the front steps together, and Adrian signaled for his carriage. It rolled up moments later, a sleek black vehicle with the blackthorn crest emblazoned on the door. "Where are you staying?" he asked. "My family's townhouse in Kensington." He handed her into the carriage and called the address to the driver. Then, to her surprise, he climbed in after her. "You don't have to," she started. "I'm not letting you face your family alone, not tonight." The carriage lurched into motion. Lillian sank back against the cushioned seat, exhaustion crashing over her in waves. "Thank you for what you did tonight." "Don't thank me yet. This is far from over." "What do you mean?" He studied her in the dim light filtering through the carriage windows. "William won't accept this quietly. He'll retaliate. Try to discredit you, turn the narrative back in his favor." "How?" "Any way he can. Spreading rumors, pressuring your family, making your life as difficult as possible until you come crawling back." Fear coiled in her stomach. "And if I don't?" "Then he'll try to destroy you completely." Adrian's expression was grim. "That's who he is. He can't tolerate being defied." "Then what do we do?" "We make sure he doesn't get the chance." He leaned forward, his dark eyes intense. "But I need to know that you're committed to this, that you won't lose your nerve when things get difficult." Lillian thought about William's cold dismissal, about Clara's tears, about 4 months of lies. "I'm committed," she said. "Good, because starting tomorrow, your life is going to change dramatically." "How?" "You're going to be seen with me, often, at balls, at the theater, at every major social event this season. You're going to be seen as mine." Her breath caught. "But we're not. I mean, this is just a strategy." "Yes, but no one else can know that." His gaze held hers. "If we do this, we do it completely. No half measures, no doubts. The entire ton has to believe that I'm courting you. And when the season ends, we'll deal with that when it comes." He paused. "But I promise you this, whatever happens, you won't be worse off than you are now." It was a calculated gamble, a temporary alliance, a means to an end. But it was also the only option she had. "All right," she said. "I'm in." The carriage rolled to a stop in front of her family's townhouse. Through the windows, she could see lights blazing in every room. They were awake, waiting. Adrian climbed out first and offered his hand. She took it, letting him help her down. "Do you want me to come in with you?" he asked. She considered it. Part of her desperately wanted his steady, authoritative presence. But another part, the part that was tired of hiding behind other people, knew she had to face this alone. "No," she said. "I need to do this myself." "May..." He nodded, respect flickering in his eyes. "Then I'll call on you tomorrow, 11 o'clock. Be ready?" "For what?" A faint smile. "To start a war." He climbed back into the carriage and disappeared into the night. Lillian stood on the steps of her family's townhouse, staring at the door, gathering her courage. Then she lifted her chin, straightened her shoulders, and walked inside. Her father was in the drawing room, pacing like a caged animal. Her mother sat on the sofa, a handkerchief pressed to her eyes. Her two younger sisters huddled together in the corner, their faces pale. The moment Lillian entered, her father whirled on her. "What have you done?" His voice shook with fury. "What in the name of heaven have you done?" "I ended my engagement to William Ashford." "You've destroyed us." He slammed his hand against the mantelpiece. "Do you have any idea what this means? The debts that will be called in? The consequences?" "Father, I received 3 messages while you were dancing with the Duke of Ashford. 3 creditors who have heard the rumors and want their money immediately." Her mother let out a sob. "I'm sorry," Lillian said, and she meant it, "but I couldn't marry him." "Couldn't?" Her father's face was purple with rage. "You selfish, stupid girl. This wasn't about what you wanted. This was about survival." "He was having an affair." "I don't care if he was having a dozen affairs. You should have kept your mouth shut and done your duty." The words hit her like a physical blow. Her father stepped closer, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "Tomorrow, you will go to William Ashford. You will apologize. You will beg for his forgiveness, and you will fix this." "No, that wasn't a request. I'm not marrying him, Father, no matter what you say." His hand rose. She saw it coming, and she braced herself for the blow. It never came. Her father's hand froze in midair, trembling. Then he dropped it, his expression crumpling into something that looked almost like grief. "Then you've killed us all," he whispered. He turned and walked out of the room. Lillian stood there, shaking, as her mother's sobs filled the silence. Her younger sister, Emma, crept forward. "Lily, what's going to happen to us?" Lillian pulled her into a fierce hug. "I don't know, but I promise I'm going to fix this." She just had no idea how. That night, Lillian lay awake in her room, staring at the ceiling. Everything she'd known, everything she'd counted on, had been stripped away in a single evening. Her engagement, her best friend, her father's respect, her family's security, all of it, gone. But as she lay there in the darkness, she realized something. For the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid. She was angry, and anger, she was learning, was a far more useful emotion than fear. Tomorrow, Adrian would come, and together they would begin the work of making sure William Ashford got exactly what he deserved. She didn't know if she'd win, but she knew, with absolute certainty, that she was going to fight, and that was enough. For now. Lillian woke to gray dawn light filtering through her curtains and the sound of raised voices downstairs. She'd managed perhaps 2 hours of sleep, her mind churning through everything that had happened, everything that was about to happen. She dressed quickly in a simple day dress of dark green muslin, pinning her hair back with trembling fingers. In the mirror, she looked pale, hollow-eyed, like a ghost of the girl she'd been yesterday. Good. She didn't want to be that girl anymore. The voices grew louder as she descended the stairs. Her father's angry baritone, her mother's pleading soprano, and a third voice, male, unfamiliar, with an edge of desperation. She found them in the drawing room. Her father stood by the fireplace, his face still mottled with fury from the night before. Her mother perched on the edge of a chair, twisting her handkerchief, and a thin man in a shabby coat stood near the door, hat in hand. "Miss Carter," the man said when he saw her, "I'm Mr. Dennison. I represent Harwell and Sons Bank. I'm here to inform your father that the loan extended to him last autumn is being called in. Immediately." Lillian's stomach dropped. "How much?" £3,000, due within the week. It might as well have been 3 million. They didn't have 3,000 pence, let alone pounds. "This is because of last night," her father said, his voice flat. "Isn't it?" Mr. Dennison had the grace to look uncomfortable. "I'm simply following instructions from Mr. William Ashford, who sits on the bank's board of directors." "Of course he does." Lillian's hands curled into fists. "Tell Mr. Ashford that he can take his instructions and—" "Lillian!" her mother gasped, but Mr. Dennison was already backing toward the door. "I'm sorry, truly, but the deadline stands. 1 week." He fled. The silence that followed was suffocating. "Well," her father said finally, "I hope your pride was worth it." He walked out without another word. Lillian stood frozen, the weight of what she'd done crashing down on her. £3,000, 1 week. Impossible. Her mother rose slowly, her face aged overnight by worry. Your father is going to speak with his solicitor this morning to see if there's anything that can be done. There isn't. You don't know that. I do. William is doing this to punish me, to force me to come back to him. Her mother's expression hardened. Then perhaps you should. What? Go to him, apologize, see if the engagement can be salvaged. Lillian stared at her mother, searching for some sign that she was joking. You can't be serious. I'm perfectly serious. This family cannot survive 3,000 pounds in debt being called in. Your father will lose everything. The house, the furniture, his reputation. We'll be destitute. So I should marry a man who's been lying to me for months, who treats me like property. You should do your duty to your family. Her mother's voice cracked. Do you think I loved your father when we married? Do you think any of this was what I wanted? The confession hung in the air between them. No, Lillian said quietly. I don't suppose you did. Marriage isn't about love, Lillian. It's about security, survival. And if you'd had any sense at all, you would have understood that and kept your mouth shut last night. I couldn't. Then you're a fool. Her mother gathered her skirts and swept toward the door. And we'll all pay the price for your foolishness. She was gone before Lillian could respond. Lillian sank into a chair, pressing her hands to her face. What had she expected? That her mother would support her? Understand? The clock on the mantel chimed 10:30. Adrian would be here in 30 minutes. She needed to pull herself together. At precisely 11 o'clock, Adrian Blackthorne's carriage rolled to a stop in front of the Carter townhouse. Lillian watched from the drawing room window as he descended, tall, impeccably dressed in dark gray, moving with that same controlled authority that had steadied her last night. The butler announced him moments later. Adrian swept into the room and stopped short when he saw her face. What's happened? William called in my father's debts, 3,000 pounds due in 1 week. His expression darkened. Of course he did. My parents think I should apologize to him, beg for the engagement to be reinstated. And what do you think? I think I'd rather jump in the Thames. A faint smile touched his lips. Good. Then we proceed as planned. What plan? You said we'd start a war, but you didn't say how. He settled into a chair across from her, steepling his fingers. William's power comes from 3 sources: his family's banking interests, his social connections, and his reputation as a respectable gentleman. We're going to systematically dismantle all 3. How? By exposing the truth about him, the affairs, the manipulation, the women he's ruined. Lillian's heart hammered. You said there were others? At least 3 that I know of. Possibly more. Young women from respectable families who got too close to him, trusted him, and ended up disgraced when things fell apart. Why didn't anyone stop him? Because he's careful. He chooses women without powerful protectors, women whose families can't afford to challenge him. Adrian's jaw tightened, and because society is far more interested in punishing the women than holding him accountable. The bitter truth of it burned in Lillian's chest. So what do? We find those women, we get their stories, and we make sure those stories reach the right ears. That could take weeks. I don't have weeks. I know. He leaned forward. Which is why we're also going to solve your more immediate problem. How? I'm going to pay your father's debt. Lillian's breath caught. What? No, absolutely not. Why not? Because I can't possibly repay you. I'm not asking you to. Then why would you do it? He met her eyes steadily. Because William is using your family as leverage. As long as he has that power over you, you're vulnerable. I'm removing that vulnerability. But 3,000 pounds is nothing to me. He said it without arrogance, simply stating a fact. And everything to your family. Let me do this, Lillian. She wanted to refuse. Every instinct screamed that accepting such a massive gift would put her in his debt in ways she couldn't afford. But if she didn't accept, her family would be destroyed. Her sisters would have no future. Her father would be ruined. There has to be something I can give you in return, she said desperately. Some way to repay. Your cooperation in bringing William down is payment enough. That's not fair to you. Let me decide what's fair to me. He stood. I'll have my solicitor deliver the funds to Harwell and Sons Bank this afternoon. The debt will be cleared by evening. Adrian, this isn't charity, Lillian. It's strategy. William tried to use your family against you. I'm making sure that tactic fails. He was already moving toward the door. Wait, she called. What do I tell my parents? The truth, that I've covered the debt as a gesture of goodwill. They'll understand what that means. What does it mean? He paused in the doorway, glancing back at her. It means you're under my protection now, and anyone who wants to hurt you will have to go through me first. Then he was gone, leaving Lillian standing in the drawing room with her heart racing and her mind spinning. This was really happening. She was going to war with one of the most powerful families in London, and her only ally was a man she'd met less than 24 hours ago. By evening, the debt had been cleared. Her father came home from his solicitor's office looking stunned and wary. Her mother's expression when she heard the news was impossible to read. The Duke of Ashford paid our debts, her father said slowly, standing in the drawing room as if afraid the floor might collapse beneath him. £3,000, just paid them. Yes, Lillian said. Why would he do that? He said it was a gesture of goodwill. Her father's eyes narrowed. Nothing is ever just a gesture of goodwill. What does he want? He wants to court me properly, without William's interference. Court you. Her father said it like he was testing the words. The Duke of Ashford wants to court you. Is that so impossible to believe? Frankly, yes. He began to pace. The man hasn't shown interest in a woman in over a decade. He's refused every marriage-minded mama in London. And now suddenly, he's paying £3,000 to clear the way to court my daughter? Maybe he likes her, her mother offered quietly. Maybe he's playing a game we don't understand. Her father stopped pacing and looked at Lillian. Be careful. Men like that don't do anything without calculating the cost. I know. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, you've traded one dangerous alliance for another. He wasn't wrong, but at least with Adrian, she knew where she stood. He'd been honest about his motives, his strategy, his desire for revenge. That was more than William had ever given her. I can handle it, she said. Her father studied her for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, he nodded. I hope you're right. Quote, the next morning, Lillian received a note from Adrian, delivered by a footman in the Blackthorn livery. Be ready at 2 o'clock. We're going riding in Hyde Park. Wear something that will make people notice you. She stared at the note, her stomach churning with equal parts excitement and terror. Hyde Park at the fashionable hour, where everyone who mattered would see them together. It was a declaration. She chose a riding habit of deep burgundy velvet with black trim, fitted and elegant. Her maid dressed her hair in a simple chignon with a few curls framing her face. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. She looked formidable. Adrian arrived precisely at 2. He helped her into the carriage without a word, his expression unreadable. They rode to Hyde Park in silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It felt like the quiet before a storm. When they arrived, a groom was waiting with 2 horses, a magnificent black stallion for Adrian and a spirited gray mare for Lillian. Can you ride? Adrian asked. Yes, my father kept horses when I was young. Good, because we're about to put on a show. He mounted in one fluid motion, then waited while she settled into the side saddle. The mare shifted beneath her, testing, but Lillian had learned to ride on far more difficult horses than this. They set off down Rotten Row at a sedate walk, and every head turned. Whispers rippled through the crowd like wind through grass. Ladies leaned close to one another, murmuring behind their fans. Gentlemen stared openly. The Duke of Ashford and Lillian Carter riding together in broad daylight, after last night's scene at the ball. They're all staring, Lillian murmured. Good. Let them. Adrian's voice was calm. Remember, you have nothing to be ashamed of. A group of young ladies approached on foot, Clara Whitmore among them. Lillian's hands tightened on the reins. Clara looked up, saw her, and went pale. For a moment their eyes met. Then Clara looked away, shame written across her features. Well done, Adrian said quietly. Don't acknowledge her. She's beneath your notice now. They continued on, and Lillian felt something unfurl in her chest. Power. Pride. For the first time in her life, she wasn't the one looking away. Then she saw William. He was walking with a group of gentlemen from the banking district, dressed impeccably in dark blue. When he caught sight of them, he stopped dead. Adrian guided his horse directly toward them. "Gentlemen," he said pleasantly, "beautiful afternoon for a ride." The other men murmured agreement, clearly uncomfortable. William's eyes fixed on Lillian. "Miss Carter, how unexpected to see you here." "Is it?" She kept her voice light. "I would think after last night you'd expect to see us together." His jaw clenched. "Might I have a word with you? Privately?" "No. I insist, and I refuse." She smiled, the expression cold. "If you have something to say to me, you can say it here." The other gentlemen were staring now, fascinated and horrified in equal measure. William's face flushed. "You're making a mistake." "I don't think I am." "He doesn't care about you. You're just a pawn in whatever game he's playing. Better an acknowledged pawn than a deceived fool." Adrian's horse shifted, a subtle movement that put him between Lillian and William. "I think this conversation is over." "This isn't finished," William said, his voice low and dangerous. "You're right," Adrian replied. "It's not." They rode on, leaving William standing in the middle of Rotten Row, fists clenched and humiliation written across his face. Lillian's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. "That," Adrian said, "was perfect. I thought I was going to be sick." "You didn't look it. You looked like a duchess." The word hung in the air between them, weighted, significant. They rode for another hour, long enough to be seen by everyone who mattered. By the time they returned to the Carter townhouse, Lillian was exhausted, her nerves frayed to breaking. Adrian helped her dismount, his hands steady at her waist. "You did well today," he said. "It doesn't feel like it." "That's because you're not used to fighting back. Give it time. It gets easier." "Does it?" Something flickered in his eyes, something that looked almost like pain. Eventually, he stepped back, creating distance between them. "Tomorrow evening, there's a theater performance. The new production of Romeo and Juliet at Covent Garden. I have a box. You'll accompany me." "Another public appearance." "Yes, but this one will be different." "How?" "Because tomorrow I'm going to introduce you to someone who can help us." "Who?" "Lady Margaret Thornton. She runs the most influential salon in London. If we're going to spread the truth about William, we need her on our side." Lillian's pulse quickened. "And you think she'll help us?" "She will if we give her a reason to." He paused. "Lady Margaret despises men who abuse their power, and she has the ear of every important woman in society. Then why do we need to convince her?" "Because she's also ruthlessly practical. She won't risk her reputation on a scandal unless she's certain we can win." "Can we?" Adrian's expression hardened with determination. "Yes, but we need to move carefully, gather evidence, build an irrefutable case." "How long will that take?" "As long as it takes." He met her eyes. "I know you want this to be over quickly, but if we move too fast, William will find a way to turn it against us. We have to be patient." Patience. When every instinct screamed at her to act, to fight, to make William pay for what he'd done. But Adrian was right. They couldn't afford mistakes. "All right," she said. "I'll trust your judgment." "Good." He moved toward his carriage, then paused. "Lillian?" "Yes?" "What you did today, standing up to him in front of witnesses, that took real courage. I was terrified." "I know, that's what made it brave." Then he was gone, leaving her standing on the steps of her family's townhouse, watching his carriage disappear into the gathering dusk. The next evening, Lillian dressed with extra care. The theater was one of the most visible venues in London, and tonight would be crucial. She chose a gown of midnight blue silk with silver embroidery, cut fashionably low across the shoulders. Her maid arranged her hair in an elaborate updo, weaving silver ribbon through the dark curls. When Adrian arrived to collect her, his expression when he saw her made her breath catch. "You look stunning," he said simply. "Thank you." He offered his arm, and they descended to the waiting carriage. The theater was blazing with light when they arrived, the entrance thronged with London's elite. Adrian guided her through the crowd with practiced ease, ignoring the stares and whispers that followed them. His box was one of the best in the house. Center position, Perfect view of both the stage and the rest of the audience. In other words, perfect for being seen. They'd barely settled into their seats when a woman appeared at the entrance to the box. She was perhaps 50, elegantly dressed in plum silk, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Adrian," she said warmly, "what a surprise to see you here." "Margaret," he rose and kissed her hand. "Allow me to introduce Miss Lillian Carter. Lillian, Lady Margaret Thornton." Lillian stood, offering a small curtsy. "Lady Thornton, it's an honor." "Is it?" Margaret's eyes swept over her, assessing. "I've been hearing quite a lot about you, Miss Carter." "I'm sure you have." "Most of it quite scandalous." Margaret settled into the seat beside Lillian, uninvited but clearly unconcerned. "Tell me, is it true you discovered William Ashford in flagrante with Clara Whitmore?" Lillian's cheeks heated. "I discovered them together, yes." "And you walked out of your own engagement ball rather than pretend you hadn't seen it? Brave. Or foolish. I haven't decided which yet." "Perhaps both," Lillian said. Margaret laughed, a sharp, delighted sound. "Oh, I like her, Adrian. She has spine." "That's what I thought." Margaret leaned closer to Lillian, her voice dropping. "I knew William's father. Terrible man, cruel, manipulative, utterly without conscience. I always suspected the son took after him, but he's been so careful over the years. Kept his indiscretions quiet." "Until now," Adrian said. "Until now," Margaret agreed. She studied Lillian intently. "What do you want, Miss Carter?" "I want the truth about him exposed. I want other women protected from him." "Revenge, then." "Justice." "They're often the same thing." Margaret sat back, considering. "If I help you, and I emphasize if, it will cost me. William has powerful friends. Going against him publicly could damage my standing." "I understand." "Do you? Because I'm not certain you comprehend just how vicious society can be when it turns on someone. They destroyed Emily Hartwell 2 years ago on nothing more than a rumor. If we do this and fail, they'll destroy you completely." Lillian's hands trembled in her lap, but she forced her voice to remain steady. "I'm already destroyed, Lady Thornton. The only question is whether I go down quietly or fighting." Margaret's expression softened fractionally. "You remind me of myself at your age, before I learned to be cautious." "And do you regret learning caution?" "Every single day." The admission hung in the air between them. Then Margaret rose. "Very well. I'll help you. But we do this my way, at my pace. No reckless moves, no emotional outbursts. We build the case methodically, and we strike only when we're certain of victory." "Agreed," Adrian said. Margaret swept toward the door, then paused. "Oh, and Miss Carter, enjoy the performance." Romeo and Juliet is a cautionary tale about the dangers of impulsive decisions. You might find it educational. She disappeared in a rustle of silk. Lillian sank back in her seat, her heart racing. Did we just secure our most important ally? Yes. Adrian's expression was satisfied. Margaret doesn't commit to anything lightly. If she's in, she's all in. What happens now? Now we wait. Margaret will begin making discreet inquiries. She'll reach out to the women Williams hurt, see if any of them are willing to talk. And if they're not, then we find another way. He looked at her seriously. This is going to be a long fight, Lillian. There will be setbacks, moments when it feels hopeless. Can you handle that? She thought about Claire's betrayal, about William's casual cruelty, about her mother's bitter resignation to a loveless marriage. Yes, she said, I can handle it. The lights dimmed as the performance began. Lillian tried to focus on the stage, on the familiar story of star-crossed lovers unfolding before her. But her mind kept drifting to the battle ahead. Halfway through the first act, she became aware of eyes on her. She glanced around the theater and saw dozens of opera glasses trained on their box. Everyone was watching, judging, speculating about what the Duke of Ashford was doing with the disgraced Carter girl. Ignore them, Adrian murmured, not looking away from the stage. It's hard to. I know, but every moment you sit here beside me, calm and composed, you're proving them wrong about you. Am I? Or am I just confirming that I'm your latest amusement? He turned to look at her then, his dark eyes intense in the dim light. Is that what you think this is? I don't know what to think anymore. Then think this. I don't waste my time on amusements. Everything I do with purpose. And what's your purpose with me? He was silent for a long moment. Then, I'm not entirely sure yet. The honesty of it caught her off guard. Before she could respond, a commotion broke out in one of the boxes across the theater. Raised voices, a woman's cry. The performance stuttered to a halt. Lillian leaned forward, trying to see what was happening. Then her blood ran cold. William stood in his family's box, arguing with a young woman in a pale pink gown. Even from this distance, Lillian could see the woman's distress, the way she shrank back from him. "Who is that?" Lillian whispered. Adrian's jaw clenched. Rebecca Hartwell, Emily's younger sister. The woman they destroyed? Yes. William grabbed Rebecca's arm, trying to pull her back into her seat. She jerked away, and suddenly the entire theater was watching. "We have to do something," Lillian said. "We can't. Not here. It would only make things worse. But I know what he's doing. But if we intervene now, we look like we're causing a scene. We'll be blamed, not him." Lillian watched, helpless, as Rebecca fled the box in tears. William remained standing, his expression thunderous, before finally sitting down and signaling for the performance to continue. The actors resumed, but the damage was done. The audience was buzzing with speculation. Lillian's hands curled into fists. How does he keep getting away with this? Because no one with power has stopped him. Yet. Adrian's voice was cold as steel. But that's about to change. How? Rebecca Hartwell just gave us the opening we needed. Tomorrow, we go see her. We get her story, and we start building the case that will bring William down. The performance continued, but Lillian couldn't focus on it. Her mind was already racing ahead, planning, strategizing. She'd spent her whole life being afraid, being small, being grateful for scraps of respect. No more. William Ashford thought he could intimidate her into silence. He thought his power made him untouchable. He was about to learn exactly how wrong he was. As the final act drew to a close and the doomed lovers lay dead on stage, Lillian made a silent vow. She would fight, she would expose the truth, and she would make absolutely certain that William never hurt another woman again, no matter what it cost her. The curtain fell to thunderous applause, but Lillian barely heard it. She was already thinking about tomorrow, about Rebecca Hartwell, about the war they were about to wage. Adrian stood and offered his hand. Ready to face the crowd? She placed her hand in his and rose. Yes. Together they walked out into the glittering lobby, into the stares and whispers and barely concealed speculation. And for the first time, Lillian didn't feel like she was drowning. She felt like she was standing on solid ground, ready to fight. The battle for her future, for justice, had truly begun. The carriage ride back to the Carter townhouse was silent, but the air between them crackled with tension. Lillian stared out the window at the gas-lit streets of London, her mind replaying the scene at the theater over and over. Rebecca Hartwell's terrified face, William's controlling grip on her arm, the way the entire audience had watched and done nothing. We go tomorrow, she said suddenly, to see Rebecca. Adrian didn't argue. First thing in the morning, I'll send word to Lady Margaret. She'll want to be there. Do you think Rebecca will talk to us? I don't know. Her sister's disgrace nearly destroyed their family. She may be too afraid. Then we make her understand she's not alone. Lillian turned to face him. We show her there's another way besides silence. Something flickered in Adrian's expression. Approval, perhaps? Or recognition. You're starting to think like a strategist. I'm thinking like someone who's tired of being powerless. The carriage stopped in front of her house. Adrian climbed out first and offered his hand. As she descended, he held onto her fingers a moment longer than necessary. What William did tonight, grabbing Rebecca in public, it was reckless, desperate. That means we're getting to him. Good. But it also means he's becoming unpredictable, dangerous. His grip tightened fractionally. I need you to be careful. Don't go anywhere alone. Don't accept invitations without checking with me first. You think he'd try to hurt me? I think he's a man who's losing control, and those are the most dangerous kind. A chill ran down her spine, but she lifted her chin. I'm not afraid of him. You should be. Fear keeps you sharp, keeps you alive. He released her hand. I'll call for you at 9 tomorrow. Be ready. She watched his carriage disappear into the night, then turned and found her father standing in the doorway. "You were at the theater with him again," he said. "Yes." "People are talking, Lillian, saying things." "Let them talk." He stepped aside to let her pass, but caught her arm as she moved into the foyer. "What are you doing? Really?" For a moment she considered lying, making it simple, safe, but she was done with lies. "I'm bringing down the man who tried to destroy me," she said quietly, "and I'm making sure he never hurts anyone else." Her father's expression was unreadable. "That's a dangerous game." "It's the only one I have left to play." He released her arm and stepped back. "Then play it well. Because if you lose, we all lose with you." Morning came too quickly. Lillian dressed in a simple day dress of charcoal gray, somber, respectable, non-threatening. When Adrian's carriage arrived at 9, Lady Margaret was already inside. "Miss Carter," Margaret said briskly, "Adrian tells me you're determined to speak with Rebecca Hartwell today." "I am." "Good. I've sent word ahead. She's agreed to see us, though she's terrified. Her mother still hasn't recovered from Emily's scandal." The carriage lurched into motion, heading toward the less fashionable district where the Hartwells now lived. The houses here were smaller, shabbier, evidence of a family fallen from grace. "What happened to Emily?" Lillian asked. Margaret's expression darkened. 2 years ago, Emily Hartwell was engaged to Lord Pemberton's son. Beautiful girl, intelligent, everything a man could want. Then rumors started circulating that she'd been seen in compromising situations with other men. The engagement was broken, her reputation destroyed. Were the rumors true? Does it matter? True or not, she was ruined. The family lost their social standing. Emily was sent to live with an aunt in Scotland. She never recovered. And William? Was one of the men she was supposedly seen with. Margaret's voice was ice. Though no one ever proved anything definitive. Adrian leaned forward. "I've always suspected he started those rumors himself. Emily had refused his advances. He doesn't handle rejection well." The carriage stopped in front of a narrow townhouse with peeling paint and a crooked gate. They climbed out, and Margaret led the way to the door. A maid answered, young, nervous, clearly unused to receiving visitors of quality. She showed them into a cramped sitting room where Rebecca Hartwell waited. The girl was perhaps 19, delicate and pale, with the kind of fragile beauty that made Lillian's heart ache. She looked like she might shatter at a harsh word. "Miss Hartwell," Margaret said gently, "thank you for seeing us." Rebecca's hands twisted in her lap. "I don't know what you want from me." "The truth," Lillian said, settling into the chair across from her. "About William Ashford." Rebecca flinched at the name. "I can't. If I say anything, he'll what? Destroy you like he destroyed your sister?" "Lillian," Adrian warned. But Rebecca was looking at her now, really looking. "You're the girl who walked out on him, at the ball." "Yes." "Everyone says you're mad, that you threw away your future over nothing. It wasn't nothing. He'd been having an affair with my best friend for months. He was going to marry me anyway and keep her as his mistress." Rebecca's breath hitched. "That's what he told Emily. That he loved her. That he'd marry her. Then when she believed him, when she let him—" Her voice broke. "He told everyone she'd thrown herself at him. That she was desperate, unhinged." Lillian felt fury rising in her chest like a tide. "Did he hurt you last night? At the theater?" "He wanted me to leave with him, to go somewhere private. I refused, and he—" She touched her arm where bruises were already forming. "He said I was ungrateful, that after everything he'd done for our family, I owed him." "What had he done for your family?" Adrian asked. "He paid off some of our debts. After Emily's scandal, we were drowning. He offered to help, and my mother was so grateful she practically pushed me into his arms." Margaret's expression was grim. "Let me guess. Now he's holding those debts over your head." Rebecca nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "He said if I didn't cooperate, he'd call them in. We'd lose everything. My younger brothers would be put out on the street." "How much does your family owe him?" £2,000. Lillian looked at Adrian. He gave a slight nod. "What if that debt disappeared?" Lillian asked. Rebecca's head jerked up. "What? What if someone paid it off, completely? No strings attached." "Why would anyone do that?" Because you deserve to be free of him. Lillian leaned forward. But in exchange, we need you to tell us everything. Every interaction you've had with William. Every threat, every manipulation, every moment where he made you feel powerless. If I do that, he'll destroy me like he destroyed Emily. Not if we destroy him first. Rebecca stared at her, something like hope flickering in her eyes. You really think you can? I know we can, but we need proof. We need witnesses willing to speak. There are others, Rebecca whispered. Girls he's approached, some who gave in, some who refused and paid the price. Margaret pulled out a small notebook. Names. We need names. For the next hour, Rebecca talked. She gave them 5 names, 5 young women from respectable but vulnerable families. Women William had targeted, manipulated, and in some cases, destroyed. By the time they left the Hartwell house, Lillian felt sick. The scope of William's cruelty was staggering. We need to move faster, she said as they climbed back into the carriage, before he hurts anyone else. We move carefully, Margaret corrected. If we approach these women and word gets back to William, he'll know what we're doing. He'll retaliate. Then what do? We divide and conquer. I'll approach the women I know personally. Adrian can use his connections for the others. You... Margaret studied her. You're going to be the visible distraction. What does that mean? It means you continue being seen with Adrian. You attend every social event, every ball, every dinner. You make yourself impossible to ignore. While William is focused on you, we work behind the scenes. You want me to be bait. I want you to be exactly what you've been. Someone who refuses to hide. Someone who stands in the light while we work in the shadows. It made strategic sense. But the idea of painting a target on her back made Lillian's stomach churn. Adrian must have seen it in her face because he said, "You don't have to do this. We can find another way." No. Lillian straightened her shoulders. Margaret's right. This is the fastest way to protect the others. I'll do it. Then we need to make you bulletproof, Margaret said, starting tonight. That evening, Lillian found herself at the Devonshire Ball, one of the most prestigious events of the season. She wore a gown of emerald green silk that Adrian had sent over, along with a note. Wear this. Trust me. The dress was stunning, cut to perfection, elegant without being ostentatious. When she descended the stairs to meet Adrian, his expression told her everything she needed to know. You'll be the most beautiful woman there, he said simply. That's not the goal. No, but it doesn't hurt. The ballroom was already crowded when they arrived. Lillian felt the now familiar wave of stares and whispers, but she kept her head high, her hand steady on Adrian's arm. They'd barely made it 3 steps into the room when William appeared. He looked terrible, pale, with dark circles under his eyes, and a tightness around his mouth that spoke of barely controlled rage. Cousin, he said to Adrian, his voice dripping with false civility. How unexpected to see you here. Is it? The Devonshires are old friends. And Miss Carter, still clinging to Adrian's coattails, I see. Lillian met his eyes steadily. Still attacking women who say no to you, I see. His face flushed. I don't know what lies Rebecca Hartwell has been spreading, but I didn't mention Rebecca. Lillian's voice was perfectly pleasant. Interesting that you assumed I was talking about her specifically. Unless there are so many women you've attacked that you can't keep track? The people around them had gone silent, listening. William stepped closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. You're going to regret this. Is that a threat? It's a promise. Adrian moved between them, his presence a wall of controlled power. I think you should leave now, William. This is a public ball. I have every right to be here. And I have every ability to make you leave. Your choice. Walk out with dignity, or be escorted out by the Devonshire's footmen. For a long moment, William stood there, fury radiating from him. Then he turned on his heel and stalked away. But Lillian saw the look he threw back over his shoulder, pure hatred. He's going to retaliate, she murmured. Let him try. Adrian guided her toward the dance floor. Dance with me. As they moved through the waltz, Lillian became aware of something shifting in the room. Women were watching her differently now. Not with pity or scorn, but with something that looked almost like admiration. They're on your side, Adrian said, following her gaze. What? The women. They saw what William just did, how he threatened you. They're starting to see what he really is. But they're not saying anything. Not yet, but they will. Once they see it's safe to speak. The dance ended, and Lady Margaret materialized at Lillian's elbow. Come with me. There's someone you need to meet. She led them to a quiet alcove where a woman in her 30s waited, elegant, poised, with intelligent eyes that missed nothing. Miss Carter, may I present Lady Elizabeth Worthington. Elizabeth, this is Lillian Carter. I know who she is. Elizabeth's voice was warm. I wanted to tell you, Miss Carter, that what you did, walking away from William Ashford, it was the bravest thing I've seen in years. Lillian blinked. Thank you, but you don't understand. 5 years ago, I was engaged to him. The room seemed to tilt. What? Pursued me relentlessly. Charming, attentive, everything a girl could want. We were engaged for 3 months before I discovered he was also courting my cousin. When I confronted him, he called me jealous, hysterical. He spread rumors that I was mentally unstable. The engagement was broken, and I spent 2 years in the country waiting for the scandal to die down. Why didn't you speak out? Because I had no proof, no allies, and I was terrified. Elizabeth's hands clenched. But watching you stand up to him at the theater, seeing you refuse to be cowed, it made me realize I don't have to be silent anymore. Margaret was smiling. Elizabeth has agreed to testify, to tell her story publicly if needed. And I'm not the only one, Elizabeth added. I've been in contact with 3 other women. We've all been comparing notes. The pattern is unmistakable. Lillian felt something unfurl in her chest. Hope. Real, tangible hope. You'd really do this? Risk your reputations? Our reputations are already tarnished because of him, Elizabeth said firmly. At least this way we fight back. They talked for another hour, Elizabeth sharing names and stories, Margaret taking meticulous notes. By the time they finished, they had testimony from 8 women. 8 separate accounts of William's manipulation, cruelty, and abuse. It was enough. It had to be enough. We need to be strategic about this, Margaret said. We can't just spread rumors. We need to present a united front backed by irrefutable evidence. What kind of evidence? Lillian asked. Letters. Witnesses to the affairs. Financial records showing the debts he's used as leverage. Margaret's eyes gleamed. We build a case so solid that even his family's money and influence can't save him. Adrian had been quiet, listening. Now he said, There's one more thing we need. What? Proof that he's been embezzling from the bank. Lillian's breath caught. What? I've suspected it for months, small amounts, carefully hidden. But if I'm right, it's enough to send him to prison. Can you prove it? I can if I can access the bank's private ledgers. But how do we get those? A slow smile crossed Adrian's face. We break into the bank. Margaret's eyes widened. You can't be serious. I'm entirely serious. The evidence is there. We just need to retrieve it. That's insane. If you're caught, we won't be caught. I know the building's layout. I know where the records are kept, and I know when the night guards make their rounds. Lillian's heart was pounding. When? Tomorrow night, during the Ashford family dinner. William will be occupied and the bank will be empty. I'm coming with you, Lillian said. Absolutely not. You need someone to stand watch, someone the guards won't question if they see her. It's too dangerous. And everything else we've been doing isn't? She stepped closer. You told me to think like a strategist. A strategist knows when to take calculated risks. This is one of them. Adrian looked at Margaret. Talk some sense into her. Why? She's right. Margaret's expression was thoughtful. Besides, if you're caught, having the Duke of Ashford and the disgraced Lillian Carter breaking into a bank together creates a very different narrative than the Duke alone. What narrative? A love story. 2 people so desperate to be together that they'd commit crimes to eliminate the obstacle standing between them. Margaret shrugged. Society forgives a lot in the name of romance. Adrian looked like he wanted to argue, but Lillian could see the moment he realized Margaret was right. Fine, he said. But we do this my way. You follow my instructions exactly. No improvisation, no heroics." Agreed. They left the ball shortly after, Lillian's mind racing with plans and possibilities. She was really going to do this, break into a bank, steal evidence, risk everything. A year ago, even a month ago, she would have been terrified. Now, she felt alive. The next evening, Lillian dressed in dark colors, a simple dress of deep navy that would blend into shadows. She told her parents she was attending a small dinner party with Lady Margaret. Adrian's carriage collected her at 8 o'clock. He changed from his usual fine clothes into something more practical. Dark trousers, a black coat, no unnecessary embellishments. "Last chance to back out," he said as the carriage rolled toward the banking district. "Not a chance." They arrived at this bank just after 9. The building was dark, imposing, with bars on the lower windows and a heavy iron door. Adrian produced a key. "I'm on the board of directors. They gave me access for emergencies." "And this qualifies as an emergency? Stopping a criminal from destroying more lives?" "I'd say so." The lock turned smoothly. They slipped inside and Adrian locked the door behind them. The interior was pitch black. Adrian lit a small lantern, keeping the light low. "The ledgers are kept in the vault on the second floor. We have maybe 30 minutes before the night guard makes his next round." They moved quickly through the building, their footsteps muffled on the thick carpet. Every creak of the old building made Lillian's heart jump. The vault was behind a heavy door secured with a combination lock. Adrian's fingers moved swiftly over the dial. "How do you know the combination?" "I watched William open it once. He's arrogant enough to think no one pays attention." The lock clicked. The door swung open. Inside, rows of ledgers lined the shelves, organized by date and department. Adrian scanned them quickly, then pulled down 3 volumes. "These are the ones we need, but we can't just take them. It would be too obvious." "Then what do we do?" "We copy the relevant pages." He pulled out a small notebook and pencil. "Start with this one. Look for any entries marked with William's initials. Note the dates and amounts." They worked in tense silence, the scratch of pencil on paper loud in the confined space. Lillian's hands were shaking, but she forced them steady. 10 minutes passed. 15. Then, from somewhere below, a door slammed. They both froze. "The guard," Adrian whispered. "He's early." Footsteps echoed through the building, getting closer. "We need to go. Now." Adrian shoved the ledgers back onto their shelves and pulled Lillian toward the door. But the footsteps were on the stairs now, climbing toward them. "There." Adrian pointed to a narrow door at the end of the hallway. "Storage room. We can hide until he passes." They ran silently down the hall and ducked into the small room, just as the guard reached the top of the stairs. Adrian pulled the door almost closed, leaving just a crack to see through. The guard walked past, lantern in hand, checking doors. He paused at the vault. Lillian held her breath. The guard tried the vault door. It was locked. Adrian had secured it behind them. After what felt like an eternity, the guard moved on, descending the stairs. They waited another 5 minutes, then slipped out of the storage room and made their way back downstairs. The front door was still locked. Adrian opened it carefully, and they stepped out into the cool night air. "That was too close," Lillian whispered. "But we got what we needed." Adrian patted his pocket where the notebook rested. Enough to prove embezzlement. The carriage was waiting around the corner. They climbed in, and only when they were safely moving through the streets did Lillian allow herself to breathe. "We did it," she said, half laughing, half gasping. "We did." Adrian was studying her. "You were brilliant in there, calm under pressure." I was terrified. Fear and courage aren't opposites. They're companions. The carriage rolled through the darkened streets, and Lillian felt the enormity of what they'd done settling over her. They had evidence now. Real, irrefutable evidence. "What happens next?" she asked. "Next, we put all the pieces together, the testimonies, the financial records, the pattern of abuse, and we take it to someone who can't be bought or intimidated." "Who?" "The Lord Chancellor. He's one of the few men in London with more power than the Ashford family. If we present him with airtight evidence, he'll have no choice but to act." "When?" "Tomorrow. We strike while William's still reeling from tonight's dinner, before he has a chance to regroup." The carriage stopped in front of the Carter townhouse. Adrian walked her to the door. "Thank you," she said, "for letting me be part of this. Thank you for having the courage to fight." He paused. "Lillian, if this goes wrong tomorrow, if something happens, I need you to know that what we've done, what you've done, it matters. You've given those women their voices back. Nothing's going to go wrong. But if it does," she reached out and squeezed his hand, "then we'll face it together." He looked down at their joined hands, and something shifted in his expression. "Together." "Yes." Then he was gone, disappearing into the night. Lillian climbed the stairs to her room, her mind whirling. Tomorrow, they would present their case. Tomorrow, William would finally face justice. She changed for bed but couldn't sleep. Instead, she sat by the window, watching the city slowly wake as dawn approached. She didn't hear the footsteps in the hallway until it was too late. Her bedroom door crashed open. William stood there, disheveled and wild-eyed, with two men she didn't recognize flanking him. "Did you really think I wouldn't find out?" His voice was cold, controlled. "Did you think you could break into my bank and I wouldn't hear about it?" Lillian's blood turned to ice. "How did you—" The guard reported unusual activity. "I put the pieces together." He stepped into the room. "You and Adrian, playing detective. How quaint." She backed away, looking for something, anything she could use as a weapon. "Get out of my house." "Or what? You'll scream? Your family's asleep. The servants have been paid to look the other way." He smiled, and it was the cruelest expression she'd ever seen. "You've been a thorn in my side for too long, Lillian. It's time to remove you permanently." "You can't just—" "Can't I? A tragic accident, the unstable girl who threw away her engagement, driven mad by jealousy and rejection. Everyone will believe it." The men behind him moved forward. Lillian grabbed the heavy candlestick from her bedside table and swung it. One of the men went down with a cry, but the other caught her wrist, twisting until she dropped the makeshift weapon. William approached slowly, pulling something from his pocket. A small bottle. "Laudanum," he said conversationally. "Enough to make you sleep. And then, well, accidents happen. Falls downstairs. Tragic, really. Adrian knows I'm here. If anything happens to me, Adrian is miles away, safe in his townhouse, with no idea what's happening." William uncorked the bottle. "By the time he realizes, it will be far too late." The man holding her forced her jaw open. William brought the bottle closer. This was it. This was how it ended. Then, from somewhere downstairs, a voice rang out. "Miss Carter, are you awake? It's Lady Margaret. I apologize for the early hour, but it's urgent." William froze. More voices. Multiple people entering the house. "She brought reinforcements," Lillian gasped. "Margaret knew you'd try something." William's expression turned murderous. He threw the bottle against the wall where it shattered. "This isn't over." "Yes," Lillian said, finding her courage even as she shook with terror. "It is." Footsteps pounded up the stairs. The door burst open again, and Adrian stormed in with two constables, Margaret right behind them. William's men released Lillian and backed away. "William Ashford," one of the constables said formally, "you're under arrest for attempted assault, breaking and entering, and conspiracy to commit murder. You can't prove anything." "Actually," Margaret said, stepping forward, "we can. I've been watching your house all evening. I saw you leave with these men. I followed you here, and I brought witnesses." More people crowded into the doorway, neighbors roused by the commotion, all staring at William with shock and horror. Adrian moved to Lillian's side, steadying her. "Are you hurt?" "No, shaken, but not hurt." "He tried to drug her," one of the neighbors gasped. "We all heard it." William was backed into a corner, literally and figuratively. His face had gone from flushed to pale, his eyes darting between the constables and the crowd of witnesses. "This is a misunderstanding," he said desperately. "I came to talk to her, to apologize, and she attacked me. With over a dozen witnesses who just heard you admit to planning her death?" Margaret's voice was ice. "I don't think so." The constables moved forward with shackles. "You'll regret this," William hissed at Lillian as they clamped the iron around his wrists. "All of you, my family will destroy you." "Your family," Adrian said quietly, "is about to learn exactly what kind of monster you are. And believe me, they will throw you to the wolves to save themselves." They dragged William away, his protests echoing through the house. Lillian's legs gave out. Adrian caught her, lowering her gently into a chair. "It's over," he said. "You're safe now." But Lillian was shaking her head. "He said his family would destroy us. He meant it." "Let them try." Margaret settled into a chair across from her. By morning, every scandal sheet in London will have this story. William Ashford caught attempting to murder the woman who rejected him. With witnesses. With proof. And the embezzlement? We'll present that evidence to the Lord Chancellor tomorrow as planned. But honestly, Margaret smiled, I don't think we'll need it. He's already finished. Adrian pulled something from his pocket, the notebook with the copied ledger entries. Still, better to be thorough. As dawn broke over London, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Lillian sat surrounded by the people who had fought for her, who had believed in her. She'd survived. More than that, she'd won. But as the sun rose higher, as the reality of what had happened began to sink in, one thought kept circling through her mind. William had been willing to kill her, to actually murder her rather than face the consequences of his actions. How many other women had he hurt? How many had he threatened, intimidated, or worse? And how close had she come to becoming just another tragic story? The battle might be over, but the war to make sure no woman ever had to face this alone again, was just beginning. The constables had barely dragged William from the house when Lillian's father appeared in the doorway, his nightshirt hastily tucked into trousers, his face ashen. Behind him, her mother clutched her robe, eyes wide with shock. "What in heaven's name is happening?" her father demanded. "William Ashford just tried to murder your daughter," Margaret said calmly, as if discussing the weather. "Fortunately, we anticipated such a move and were prepared." Her mother swayed. Adrian moved to steady her, guiding her to a chair. "Murder?" Her father's voice cracked. That's impossible. He's a respected banker. His family raised a predator," Adrian said flatly, "and he's been hiding behind their name for years." Neighbors still crowded in the hallway, whispering frantically. Margaret stood and addressed them with the authority of a general commanding troops. "Ladies and gentlemen, I know this is shocking, but I ask that you remember what you saw and heard tonight. William Ashford admitted to planning Miss Carter's death. You are all witnesses. When the authorities ask, and they will, I trust you'll tell the truth." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Mrs. Henshaw from next door stepped forward, her face fierce despite her nightcap. "We heard every word through the walls, Your Grace," she said to Adrian. "That monster threatened her, said he'd make it look like an accident. We'll testify to it, every one of us." "Thank you." Adrian's voice was warm with genuine gratitude. "Your courage will help ensure he never harms anyone again." As the neighbors slowly dispersed, still buzzing with the scandal, Lillian's father sank into a chair beside his wife. "I told you to apologize to him," he said to Lillian, his voice hollow. "I told you to make amends. If she had, she'd be trapped in a marriage with a man who just attempted to kill her," Margaret interrupted sharply. "Would you prefer that outcome, Mr. Carter?" He had no answer. Lillian's mother reached for her hand, gripping it tightly. "You could have died." "But I didn't." Lillian squeezed back, feeling the tremor in her mother's fingers. "I'm here. I'm safe." "Because you were brave enough to fight," her mother whispered. "Braver than I ever was." The admission hung in the air between them, years of unspoken resentment and regret crystallizing in a single moment. "We should let Miss Carter rest," Adrian said gently. "It's been a harrowing night." "No." Lillian stood, her voice firm despite her exhaustion. "I'm not resting. Not yet. We need to move while we have momentum." Margaret nodded approvingly. "The girl's right. By noon, every scandal sheet in London will be printing this story. We need to control the narrative." "How?" Lillian asked. "We give them a better story than they could ever invent on their own." Margaret's eyes gleamed with strategic brilliance. "The truth. All of it. Every woman he's hurt, every debt he's manipulated, every lie he's told. We flood London with so much evidence that even his family's money can't bury it." Adrian pulled the notebook from his pocket. "And we present this to the Lord Chancellor as planned. The attempted murder gives us credibility we didn't have yesterday. He'll have to listen now." "What about the other women?" Lillian's mind was racing ahead. Elizabeth, Rebecca, the others. They need to be prepared for what's coming. I'll send word immediately, Margaret said. They knew this day might come. I believe they're ready. And William's family? Lillian's father asked quietly. The Ashfords are one of the most powerful families in England. They won't take this lying down. Let them try to defend him, Adrian said, his voice cold. Every word they speak in his defense will be used against them. His father served on the same boards I do. His mother hosts half the influential women in London. They'll have to choose, stand by their son and be destroyed with him, or cut him loose to save themselves. You think they'll abandon him? Lillian asked. I know they will. I've already seen the letters. Everyone turned to stare at him. Adrian's expression was grim. While you were sleeping last night, I received correspondence from Lord Ashford himself. Apparently, certain rumors about William's behavior had reached him. He wanted to know if I had any information that could help him manage the situation quietly. He knew? Lillian's voice rose. William's own father knew he was dangerous? He suspected, but he was more concerned with protecting the family name than with protecting William's victims. Adrian's disgust was palpable. I wrote back this morning, told him that quiet management was no longer an option, that his son had committed crimes that would be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. And his response? I haven't received one yet, but I will, and I suspect it will involve the Ashford family distancing themselves from William as quickly and thoroughly as possible. Margaret stood, smoothing her skirts. Then we need to move. Now, before they have time to craft a counter-narrative. She looked at Lillian. Are you strong enough for what comes next? Lillian thought about Rebecca's bruised arm, about Emily Hartwell exiled to Scotland, her life destroyed, about all the women whose names she didn't even know yet, who had suffered in silence because speaking out seemed impossible. Yes, she said. I'm strong enough. By 10 o'clock that morning, Lillian sat in Lady Margaret's opulent drawing room, surrounded by 8 women. Elizabeth Worthington was there, along with Rebecca Hartwell, and 6 others, all victims of William's manipulation, all ready to speak. The room crackled with nervous energy. Some of you know each other, Margaret began, standing before the assembled group like a general addressing her troops. Others are meeting for the first time, but you all share something in common. You've all been harmed by William Ashford, and today you're going to make sure the world knows it. Are we really doing this? One woman asked, Charlotte Pemberton, a baron's daughter. Once we speak publicly, there's no taking it back. There's also no freedom until you do, Lillian said quietly. I know you're afraid, I am too, but I'm more afraid of staying silent, of letting him hurt someone else. He tried to kill you last night, Rebecca said, her voice shaking. We all heard the news. If he's capable of that, what will he do to us? Nothing, because he's in custody. Adrian had entered the room, his presence immediately commanding attention. And because by the time we're finished, he'll have no power left to wield. He set a stack of newspapers on the table. Every single one carried headlines about William's arrest. Banking heir arrested for attempted murder. Ashford's son caught in midnight attack. Scorned lover's deadly revenge plot foiled. The story's already out, Adrian said, but these accounts focus on last night. They paint William as a jealous lover driven to extremes. We need to change that narrative, show the pattern, prove this wasn't an isolated incident born of passion, but the culmination of years of predatory behavior. Elizabeth picked up one of the papers, scanning the text. They're making it sound almost romantic, like he loved her so much he lost control. Which is exactly why we need to act now, Margaret said. I've arranged for interviews with 3 different publications, reputable ones. They've agreed to print your testimonies in full, without editorial interference. When? Charlotte asked. This afternoon, starting at 2 o'clock. A ripple of fear moved through the room. I know it's fast, Margaret continued, but we can't give William's family time to mount a defense. We need to overwhelm them with truth. What do we say? Rebecca's voice was barely above a whisper. You tell your story exactly as it happened. Don't embellish, don't hold back out of misplaced shame. What he did to you was wrong. Let the world hear it. Lillian stood and moved to the center of the room. I'll go first. I'll sit for the first interview, tell them everything, the affair with Clara, the threats, last night's attack. By the time they come to you, the foundation will be laid. You won't be alone. We'll never be alone again, Elizabeth said, standing as well. That's the point of this, isn't it? To show that there are enough of us that silence is no longer an option. One by one, the other women rose. Charlotte, Rebecca, Sarah, Jane, Victoria, Anne. 8 women, 8 stories, one united front. Margaret's expression was fierce with pride. Then let's bring him down. The interviews began at 2 o'clock sharp. Lillian sat across from Mr. Jonathan Pierce, senior editor of the London Chronicle, in Margaret's private study. He was a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a reputation for integrity. Miss Carter, he began, his pen poised over his notebook. Thank you for agreeing to speak with me. I want you to know that whatever you say here will be printed accurately and in full. You have my word. Lillian took a deep breath. Thank you, Mr. Pierce. I appreciate that. Let's start at the beginning. When did you first meet William Ashford? For the next 2 hours, Lillian told her story. She described the arrangement, the engagement, the months of feeling like property being traded. She detailed discovering William with Clara, his cold dismissal of her feelings, his attempt to continue the engagement anyway. She described the ball, the humiliation, Adrian's intervention, and then she described last night, William breaking into her home, the laudanum, the explicit threat to kill her and make it look like suicide. Mr. Pierce wrote furiously, occasionally asking clarifying questions, but mostly just listening. When she finished, he set down his pen and looked at her with something like awe. Miss Carter, this is the most extraordinary account I've heard in 20 years of journalism. It's also the truth. I don't doubt it, and when the Chronicle publishes this tomorrow morning, it's going to change everything. For me? For every woman in London who's ever been told to stay quiet, to accept mistreatment, to be grateful for scraps of respect. He gathered his notes carefully. You're giving them permission to speak. Do you understand that? Lillian hadn't thought of it that way, but as his words sank in, she felt their weight. I hope so, she said quietly. After Mr. Pierce left, Elizabeth entered for her interview with the Times, then Rebecca with the Morning Post. One by one, the women sat and spoke, their voices growing stronger with each telling. By evening, the interviewers had left, carrying with them testimonies that would reshape London's understanding of William Ashford. Lillian found Adrian in Margaret's library, reading through the financial evidence they'd copied from the bank ledgers. How did it go? He asked, setting the papers aside. Terrifying, liberating, both at once. She settled into the chair across from him. Mr. Pierce said the story would change things. Do you think that's true? I think it's already changing things. 3 more women came forward this afternoon, women we hadn't even known about. They heard about the arrests, read the preliminary reports, and decided to add their voices. 3 more? And there will be more still, once the full testimonies are published. Adrian leaned forward. William spent years making women feel isolated, alone, like they were the only ones he'd hurt. But now they're seeing they weren't alone at all. There's power in that. What about the embezzlement charges? I'm meeting with the Lord Chancellor tomorrow morning. With the attempted murder charge already filed and these testimonies about to go public, he'll have political cover to investigate the financial crimes. Before, it would have looked like a personal vendetta between cousins. Now it's part of a larger pattern of criminal behavior. And William's family? Adrian's expression hardened. Lord Ashford requested a meeting with me tomorrow afternoon. I suspect he's going to try to negotiate some kind of arrangement, offer money to make this go away quietly. Will you take it? What do you think? I think you'd rather see justice done than take his money. You're right. Adrian stood and moved to the window, looking out at the darkening London streets. But I wanted to know what you thought. This is your fight as much as mine. Then my answer is no. No deals, no quiet arrangements. William faces the full consequences of his actions. Even if his family threatens retaliation, they have considerable resources. Let them threaten. We have something more powerful than resources. What's that? The truth, and witnesses willing to speak it. A knock at the door interrupted them. Margaret entered, her face flushed with excitement. You need to see this, she said, spreading an early edition of the Chronicle across the desk. The headline took up half the front page. The Ashford Scandal, a pattern of predation exposed. Beneath it, Lillian's testimony was printed in full, alongside Elizabeth's and Rebecca's. 3 columns of text detailing years of manipulation, abuse, and carefully concealed cruelty. "It's only been a few hours," Lillian breathed. "How did they print so fast?" Mr. Pierce pulled every string he had. He said this story was too important to delay. Margaret's smile was fierce. By morning, every newspaper in London will be scrambling to catch up. The Times and the Post are rushing their own editions. Adrian scanned the article, his expression growing more satisfied with each paragraph. "This is devastating. There's no way the Ashford family can counter this." "They'll try," Margaret warned. "They'll call the women liars, claim we fabricated evidence, paint William as the real victim." "Let them try," Lillian said. "We have a dozen witnesses to last night's attack. We have financial records. We have 11 now, women willing to testify under oath. What do they have? Money, influence, fear. Fear only works when people are isolated and alone. We're not alone anymore." A footman appeared with a silver tray bearing several letters. "These just arrived, Lady Margaret, all marked urgent." Margaret opened them one by one, her eyebrows rising with each. "Well, it appears the tide is turning faster than expected." "What is it?" Adrian asked. 3 invitations. The Duchess of Somerset wants us, to attend her salon tomorrow evening. Lady Pembroke is hosting an emergency meeting of the Ladies' Charitable Society and specifically requests Miss Carter's presence. And Lord Harrington is asking if we'd be willing to testify before a parliamentary inquiry into banking practices. Lillian felt dizzy. Parliamentary inquiry? Banking fraud is a Crown matter. If they can prove William embezzled funds, it opens the door to investigating the entire Ashford banking operation. Other board members who might have known and looked the other way. Adrian's eyes gleamed. This could bring down more than just William. "Is that what we want?" Lillian asked. "We want justice," Margaret said firmly. "If that means exposing the entire corrupt system that enabled him, so be it." Another knock. The same footman looking harried. "I'm sorry to interrupt again, Lady Margaret, but there's a crowd forming outside." A crowd? They rushed to the window. Below on the street, at least 30 people had gathered, mostly women, ranging from servants to ladies in fine dresses. They held candles, talking in low voices, some holding copies of the Chronicle. "What are they doing?" Lillian whispered. As if in answer, one woman began to sing, a hymn, simple and clear. Others joined, their voices rising in the evening air. "They're holding vigil," Margaret said, her voice thick with emotion. "Supporting you. Supporting all of you." Lillian pressed her hand to the window glass, watching the candlelight flicker across determined faces. These were women who understood, who had their own stories of being dismissed, diminished, controlled. Women who were tired of being silent. "I need to go down there," Lillian said. "Are you sure?" Adrian asked. "Once you do, there's no privacy left. You'll be the face of this movement." "Good. Let me be the face. Let them see that I'm not broken or ruined or destroyed. Let them see that fighting back is possible." She didn't wait for permission. She walked out of the library, down the stairs, and out the front door. The crowd fell silent as she appeared on the steps. For a long moment, no one spoke. Lillian looked at their faces, young and old, rich and poor, all united in this moment. Then a woman near the front stepped forward. She was perhaps 30, dressed in a shopgirl's simple clothes, her face lined with hard years. "Miss Carter," she said, her voice carrying in the quiet, "I just wanted to thank you for being brave enough to speak." "I'm not special," Lillian said. "I just got tired of being afraid." "That's what makes you special." The woman's eyes were wet with tears. "You showed us we don't have to accept it, any of it." Another woman spoke up, her voice stronger. "My employer tried to force himself on me last year. I left without reference rather than submit. I've been working in a factory ever since, and everyone said I was foolish to throw away a good position. Reading your story today, it made me realize I wasn't foolish. I was brave." "You were," Lillian said firmly. "You absolutely were." More voices joined in, women sharing fragments of their own stories. Harassment, assault, Manipulation. Being told to stay quiet for the sake of propriety. Years of silence breaking open like a dam. Adrian and Margaret had followed Lillian outside. Margaret raised her voice to be heard. Ladies, what Miss Carter and the others have begun today is only the start. If you have stories, if you've been harmed and told to keep silent, we want to hear from you. Come to my house tomorrow morning. Bring your testimonies. We will listen and we will act. The crowd erupted in voices, some crying, some shouting support, all of them alive with the electricity of change. Lillian felt Adrian's hand at her elbow, steadying her. You started something tonight, he murmured. Something that can't be stopped. Good, she said. It shouldn't be stopped. They stayed on the steps for another hour as women came forward, one by one, to share their stories, to offer their support, to simply stand together in the candlelight. By the time the crowd finally dispersed, Lillian was exhausted but exhilarated. The fear that had plagued her for weeks was gone, replaced by something fiercer. Purpose. The next morning, Lillian woke to find her mother sitting beside her bed, a cup of tea growing cold on the nightstand. Mama? I've been reading the newspapers, her mother said quietly. All of them. Every testimony, every detail. Lillian sat up, uncertain. And? And I owe you an apology, more than one. Her mother's hands twisted in her lap. I told you to accept William's treatment, to be grateful for security. I taught you that your feelings didn't matter as much as survival. You were trying to protect me. I was teaching you to be a victim. Her mother's voice broke. Just like I've been a victim my entire marriage. Your father isn't cruel like William, but he isn't kind either. And I accepted that because I thought I had no choice. Mama, but you showed me there's always a choice, even when it's terrifying, even when it costs everything. She reached out and took Lillian's hand. I'm proud of you, prouder than I've ever been of anything. Tears spilled down Lillian's cheeks. She'd wanted this, her mother's approval, her understanding, for so long. What will you do now? Lillian asked. Her mother smiled, sad but real. I don't know yet, but I do know I'm not going to teach your sisters to settle for less than they deserve. They're going to grow up knowing they have choices, because of you. A knock at the door interrupted them. Lillian's maid entered, her eyes wide. Miss, there are at least 50 women downstairs waiting to speak with you. Lady Margaret's trying to organize them, but I'll be down immediately. Lillian dressed quickly in a simple day dress and descended to find Margaret's drawing room overflowing with women. Servants, governesses, ladies' companions, shop girls, even a few society women who'd slipped in through the back entrance, all of them with stories. Margaret had set up a system. Women wrote their names and brief descriptions of what had happened to them. Margaret's secretary took down full testimonies for those willing to give them. The room buzzed with voices, some angry, some tearful, all of them determined. Miss Carter. A young woman approached, perhaps 20, with a servant's cap clutched in her hands. I worked in the Ashford household 3 years ago. Mr. William, She faltered. He came to my room one night, told me if I didn't cooperate, I'd be dismissed without reference. Did you report it? To who? The housekeeper told me I must have encouraged him, that I should be grateful for his attention. Her voice hardened. I left the next day. Haven't had steady work since. But I want to testify. I want them to know what he did. Then you will, Lillian promised. Your story matters. By noon, they had testimonies from 43 women, 43 separate accounts of William's abuse spanning nearly a decade. The scope of it was staggering. This is bigger than William, Margaret said, surveying the growing stack of written statements. This is systemic. Men like him exist because society protects them, values their reputations over women's safety. Then we change society, Lillian said simply. That's not a small task. No, but nothing worth doing ever is. Adrian arrived mid-afternoon, coming directly from his meeting with the Lord Chancellor. It's done, he said, his expression satisfied. The Lord Chancellor is opening a formal investigation into the Ashford Bank. William's embezzlement is only the beginning. They're looking at the entire operation. Loans made under duress, debt manipulation, using financial leverage to coerce vulnerable families. And William? He's being held without bail. The attempted murder charge, combined with these testimonies, makes him a flight risk. His family's already distancing themselves. Lord Ashford released a statement this morning condemning his son's actions and pledging full cooperation with authorities. They're cutting him loose, Lillian said, completely. They've removed his name from the family business, revoked his inheritance, even stripped him of his title as heir. As far as the Ashford family is concerned, William no longer exists. Good, Margaret said coldly. Let him face justice alone, without the protection of his family's name. A commotion at the door drew their attention. Lillian's father entered, looking shell-shocked. I've just come from my club, he said. Every man there was talking about the scandal, some defending William, calling it a conspiracy, but others, he paused, others were asking questions about their own behavior, about sons and nephews who might have similar patterns, about how many women they dismissed as hysterical or oversensitive. Good, Lillian said. They should be asking those questions. Her father looked at her with something like wonder. You've changed everything. In 3 days, you've made men who've never questioned their privilege start to question it. I didn't do it alone. No, but you started it. He took a deep breath. I was wrong, Lillian. About William, about what I expected of you, about everything. I'm sorry. It was more than she'd ever expected from him, more than she'd thought possible. Thank you, she said simply. That evening, Lillian attended the Duchess of Somerset's salon on Adrian's arm. The room fell silent when they entered, every eye tracking their movement. The Duchess herself approached, a formidable woman in her 60s, draped in emeralds, with eyes that missed nothing. Miss Carter, she said warmly, I've been wanting to meet you. What you've done, exposing that monster, it's the bravest thing I've seen in 40 years of society. Thank you, Your Grace. Don't thank me yet. I want to help. The Duchess gestured to the assembled guests, dozens of the most influential women in London. We all do. We're forming a committee to advocate for legal reforms. Better protections for women, harsher penalties for assault, financial independence rights, and we want you to chair it. Lillian's breath caught. Me? You're the one who stood up when it mattered. You're the face of this movement, whether you wanted to be or not. Use that platform. Make it count. Lillian looked at Adrian, who nodded encouragingly, then at Margaret, who smiled with fierce pride. Yes, Lillian said, I'll do it. The room erupted in applause. As the evening wore on, woman after woman approached Lillian to share support, offer resources, pledge assistance. The energy was electric, transformative. This was bigger than William now, bigger than revenge or justice for one man's crimes. This was the beginning of real change. Late that night, as Adrian's carriage took them back to the Carter townhouse, Lillian stared out at the London streets, her mind spinning with possibilities. What are you thinking? Adrian asked. That 3 weeks ago, I thought my life was over, that I'd lost everything. And now? Now I think I'm just beginning. She turned to face him. Thank you for everything you've done. I told you before, I had my own reasons for wanting William brought down. Did you? Or did you just see someone who needed help and decided to act? He was quiet for a long moment. I think it was both, but somewhere along the way it stopped being about revenge. It became about you, about making sure you had the chance to be everything you're capable of being. The admission hung in the air between them, weighted with implications neither of them was quite ready to address. Adrian, no. He held up a hand. Not yet. Not until all of this is settled. Until you're safe, until William is convicted, until you've had time to breathe without threats hanging over you. His dark eyes were intense in the dim carriage. But when that day comes, and it will come, I hope you'll let me ask you the question I've been wanting to ask since the night we met. Lillian's heart hammered. What question? Whether a strategic alliance might become something more. Before she could respond, the carriage stopped. They'd reached her house. Adrian helped her down, his hand lingering on hers. Get some rest, Lillian. Tomorrow, we meet with the parliamentary committee. The real work begins. She watched him drive away, her hand still warm from his touch, her mind reeling with everything that had happened, everything that was still to come. 3 weeks ago, she'd been a girl waiting for her life to be chosen for her. Tonight, she was a woman who'd chosen her own path, fought her own battles, and won. And tomorrow, she'd keep fighting. Not just for herself, but for every woman who'd been told to stay silent, to accept less, to be grateful for scraps. The battle wasn't over. But for the first time, Lillian knew they were going to win. The battle wasn't over. But for the first time, Lillian knew they were going to win. That certainty carried her through the sleepless night and into the morning when Adrian's carriage arrived to take her to Westminster Palace. The parliamentary inquiry was scheduled for 10 o'clock, a formal hearing before the Committee on Banking Practices and Public Morality. Lillian had dressed with care in a gown of deep plum silk, elegant but not ostentatious. Her hair was swept back simply, her only jewelry the pearl necklace her mother had given her. She wanted to look composed, credible, unshakable. She needed to be all those things. Margaret met them at the palace entrance, her expression grim. The Ashford family's lawyers are already inside. They're going to try to discredit every testimony, paint William as the victim of a conspiracy. "Let them try," Lillian said, her voice steady. "We have truth on our side." "Truth isn't always enough in rooms like this." "Then we make it enough." Adrian offered his arm. The committee members are mostly allies, men who've been looking for an excuse to investigate the Ashford Bank's practices for years. This scandal gives them the political cover they need. But they're also politicians. They'll only act if public pressure demands it. "Then it's a good thing we have public pressure," Lillian said, gesturing toward the street where at least 200 women had gathered, many holding signs reading "Justice for Victims" and "No More Silence." The crowd had been growing all morning, word spreading through the city like wildfire. When they saw Lillian, a cheer rose up, voices lifted in solidarity. Lillian waved, feeling the weight of their support settling around her shoulders like armor. Inside, the committee chamber was austere. Dark wood paneling, high ceilings, rows of benches for observers already packed with journalists and curious aristocrats. At the front, 7 men sat at a raised table, their faces ranging from sympathetic to skeptical. The chairman, Lord Harrington, was a silver-haired man in his 60s with kind eyes and a reputation for fairness. Across the aisle, William's legal team occupied their own table. 3 severe men in black robes, their expressions radiating barely concealed contempt. And behind them, in the observer section, sat Lord and Lady Ashford themselves, pale and rigid, looking like they'd aged a decade in 3 days. William was not present. He remained in custody, awaiting trial. "All rise for the Committee on Banking Practices and Public Morality," the clerk intoned. Everyone stood as Lord Harrington took his seat and banged his gavel. "This inquiry is now in session. We're here to investigate allegations of financial misconduct, abuse of power, and criminal behavior within the Ashford Banking Corporation, specifically relating to Mr. William Ashford." His gaze swept the room. "Before we begin testimony, I want to make clear that this is a fact-finding mission. We're here to uncover truth, not to serve any particular agenda. All witnesses will be treated with respect and dignity." He nodded to Lillian. "Miss Carter, you've been called as our first witness. Please take the stand." Lillian rose and walked to the witness chair, feeling hundreds of eyes tracking her movement. Her hands wanted to shake, but she clasped them tightly in her lap and forced herself to breathe. Lord Harrington's expression was gentle. "Miss Carter, thank you for your courage in coming forward. I know this is difficult. Please, in your own words, tell us what happened." She began with the engagement, the arrangement her family had made, the pressure to secure their financial future. She described discovering William with Clara, his dismissal of her feelings, his attempt to continue the marriage anyway. Then she described the escalation, the debts called in, the public humiliation, and finally, the night he'd broken into her home. "He brought laudanum," she said, her voice clear despite the emotion threatening to choke her. "He told me he was going to make it look like suicide, that no one would question the death of an unstable girl driven mad by rejection." One of the committee members leaned forward. "And you have witnesses to this?" 12 neighbors who heard everything through the walls. Lady Margaret Thornton, who followed William to my house. The Duke of Ashford, who arrived with constables. And the constables themselves, who arrested William and his accomplices. "Objection," one of William's lawyers called out. "Miss Carter's testimony is clearly biased. She's a scorned woman with every reason to fabricate these accusations." Lord Harrington's expression hardened. "Sir, You'll get your turn to cross-examine. For now, let the witness finish." Lillian continued, describing the other women. Elizabeth, Rebecca, the dozens who had come forward with similar stories. With each name, each account, the atmosphere in the room grew heavier. When she finished, Lord Harrington nodded slowly. "Thank you, Miss Carter. That must have been difficult to recount." "What's difficult is knowing he hurt so many others. What's difficult is wondering how many more there are who haven't come forward yet." William's lead attorney stood. "Miss Carter, isn't it true that you publicly embarrassed Mr. Ashford by walking out of your engagement ball?" "Yes." "And isn't it true that you then allied yourself with his cousin, the Duke of Ashford, who has long been at odds with William's branch of the family? Adrian, the Duke, offered me protection when I had nowhere else to turn." "How convenient. And in exchange for this protection, you agreed to participate in a scheme to destroy William's reputation." "No. In exchange for protection, I agreed to tell the truth about what William did. There was no scheme, no conspiracy, just facts." "Facts? Or a carefully orchestrated narrative designed to ruin a respectable man?" Lillian felt anger flare in her chest, but she kept her voice level. "If William Ashford is so respectable, why did he try to murder me? Why have 43 women come forward with similar accounts? Why did his own family disown him the moment the truth came out?" The lawyer's expression faltered. He glanced at Lord Ashford, who sat rigid in his seat, refusing to meet anyone's eyes. "I have no further questions for this witness," the lawyer said stiffly. The next witness was Elizabeth Worthington. She took the stand with her head high, her voice unwavering as she described William's pursuit of her, the broken engagement, the systematic destruction of her reputation. Then Rebecca Hartwell, pale but determined, recounting the debts used as leverage, the threats, the bruises on her arm. Then Sarah, Jane, Victoria, Anne, one after another, women stood and spoke truth to power. By the time the 10th witness finished, even the skeptical committee members looked shaken. Lord Harrington called for a recess. As people filed out of the chamber, Lillian found herself surrounded by the other women, their faces exhausted but triumphant. "We did it," Elizabeth whispered. "They heard us." "They had no choice," Margaret said, joining the group. "There are too many of us, too much evidence. Even the most cynical politician can't ignore this." Adrian approached, his expression grim. "The Ashfords' lawyers are trying to negotiate a plea agreement. They want to settle the embezzlement charges quietly in exchange for William pleading guilty to lesser charges on the assault." "Absolutely not," Lillian said immediately. "He faces full consequences or nothing." "That's what I told them." Adrian's smile was cold. "They're desperate. Lord Ashford knows that if this goes to a full trial, every detail of the bank's corrupt practices will be exposed. They'll lose everything." "Good," Rebecca said fiercely. "They should lose everything. They enabled him for years." The recess ended. They filed back into the chamber for the afternoon session. Lord Harrington looked grave as he addressed the room. "We've heard testimony from 14 witnesses detailing a pattern of predatory behavior spanning nearly a decade. We've reviewed financial documents showing systematic abuse of lending practices, using debt as leverage to coerce vulnerable families, and we have eyewitness accounts of attempted murder." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "This committee finds sufficient evidence to recommend criminal prosecution on all charges. Furthermore, we recommend a full audit of the Ashford Banking Corporation and the removal of all current board members pending investigation." Gasps rippled through the chamber. Lady Ashford made a small, broken sound. "Additionally," Lord Harrington continued, "we recommend the establishment of new regulations governing banking practices, specifically prohibiting the use of debt as coercion. And we recommend the formation of a parliamentary committee to investigate legal protections for women in cases of assault and harassment." He looked directly at Lillian. "Miss Carter, your testimony today has opened our eyes to systemic failures in how we address these crimes. I hope you'll agree to serve on that committee." Lillian rose slowly. "I would be honored, Lord Harrington." The gavel came down. "This inquiry is concluded. Our findings will be submitted to the Crown for action." The chamber erupted, journalists scrambling for the doors, observers talking loudly, William's lawyers huddling with the Ashford parents in desperate conversation. But Lillian barely heard any of it. She stood there, feeling the enormity of what had just happened settling into her bones. They'd won, not just against William, but against the entire system that had protected him. Outside, the crowd of women had grown to at least 500. When Lillian emerged from Westminster Palace, a roar went up, cheering, crying, voices lifted in celebration. A young woman pushed through the crowd, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you. Thank you for being brave enough to speak. I was assaulted by my employer last year, and everyone told me to stay quiet. But now I'm going to report it because of you." More women surged forward, each with a story, a thank you, a promise to no longer be silent. Margaret had to call for order, her voice ringing out over the crowd. "Ladies, please, there will be time for all of us to speak, to organize, to act, but for now let us celebrate this victory and prepare for the work ahead." Adrian materialized at Lillian's side, his hand at her elbow. "You need to get out of here before you're mobbed." "I don't want to leave them." "You're not leaving, you're regrouping." He guided her toward his waiting carriage. "Trust me." As they pulled away from Westminster, Lillian looked back at the sea of faces, women of all ages and classes, united in this moment of triumph. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now, William faces trial. The Crown prosecutors will throw everything at him: attempted murder, assault, embezzlement, fraud. He'll spend the rest of his life in prison. And his family? Ruined. The bank is finished. No one will trust them with money after this scandal. Lord Ashford will probably have to sell the estate just to pay the legal fees." Adrian's expression was satisfied. "They built their fortune on the backs of vulnerable people. Now they'll pay the price." "It's not enough," Lillian said quietly. "What do you mean?" "Destroying one family, prosecuting one man, it's justice, but it's not change. There are hundreds of William Ashfords out there, thousands, men who think they can hurt women without consequence. So what do you propose?" "We make sure that's no longer true." Lillian turned to face him fully. "The parliamentary committee Lord Harrington mentioned, that's just the beginning. We need new laws, better protections, social reforms that make it impossible for men like William to operate. That's going to take years, decades even." "Then we'd better start now." Adrian studied her, something like awe in his expression. "You've changed. When I first met you, you were terrified, desperate for any way out. Now you're talking about reforming society. When you first met me, I thought I had no power. Now I know better." She took a breath. "I know what power looks like when it's used against you, but I also know what it looks like when it's used for something good. I want to spend the rest of my life using whatever power I have to make sure no woman ever feels as powerless as I did." "Then you'll need allies, resources, political backing. I have allies. Margaret, Elizabeth, Rebecca, all the women who testified. That's where power really comes from. Not from money or titles, but from people standing together." "You're going to need money and titles too," Adrian said practically. "Reform requires both grassroots support and institutional access. Then I'll find a way to get both." The carriage stopped. They'd arrived not at the Carter townhouse, but at Adrian's estate, a magnificent building in Mayfair that Lillian had only seen from the outside. "Why are we here?" she asked. "Because I have something to show you." He led her through the grand entrance, past servants who bowed respectfully, up a sweeping staircase to a second-floor library. The room was enormous, lined floor to ceiling with books, dominated by a massive desk covered in papers. "This," Adrian said, gesturing to the desk, "is every piece of correspondence I've received in the past 3 days. Letters from all over England, Scotland, Wales, Ireland, from women who read about your testimony and want to join the cause. There are over 300 here, and more arrive every hour." Lillian moved to the desk, picking up letters at random. Each one told a story of abuse, assault, harassment, all ending with the same question: "What can I do to help?" "They're organizing," Adrian continued, "forming local committees, raising money, pressuring their members of parliament. What you started in London is spreading across the entire country." "I didn't start anything. I just stopped being silent." "Sometimes that's all it takes." One person refusing to accept the unacceptable. He moved closer. "Lillian, I told you in the carriage last night that I had a question to ask you. I'm going to ask it now, even though the timing is probably terrible." Her heart started hammering. Adrian, let me finish. He took her hands in his. When this began, it was strategy, a way to protect you and destroy William. But somewhere along the way, probably that first night at the theater, maybe even earlier, it became something else. You became someone I couldn't stop thinking about, someone whose courage and integrity made me want to be better than I am. I'm asking you to marry me, not for strategy, not for protection, not for any practical reason. I'm asking because I love you, because I want to spend the rest of my life fighting beside you for the world we both want to build. Lillian's breath caught. 3 weeks ago, the word marriage had meant chains, obligation, surrendering her autonomy to a man who saw her as property. But Adrian wasn't offering chains. He was offering partnership. I love you too, she said, the words spilling out before she could second-guess them. I think I have since that first night when you offered me a way to fight back instead of just accepting defeat. Is that a yes? It's a yes to partnership, to building something together, to facing whatever comes side by side. She squeezed his hands. But I need you to understand. I'm not going to be a traditional duchess. I'm not going to sit quietly in drawing rooms while you handle business. I'm going to be loud and difficult, and I'm going to challenge every unfair system I encounter. I wouldn't want you any other way. He pulled her closer. In fact, I'm counting on it. A quiet, obedient duchess would bore me to death within a week. She laughed, feeling lighter than she had in months. Then, yes, I'll marry you. He kissed her then, not the chaste, formal kiss of duty, but something real and fierce and full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, Lillian was breathless and dizzy, and utterly certain this was right. When should we tell people? She asked. Tomorrow, after the trial verdict comes in. Let that be the focus for now. Justice for William's victims. Then we can announce our engagement and let society make of it what they will. They'll say you're taking advantage of me, that I'm a fortune hunter who seduced you. Let them say it. We know the truth. And frankly, after everything you've survived, I think a little gossip won't break you. No, she agreed. It won't. William's trial lasted 3 days. The courtroom was packed with observers, journalists, society members, and dozens of women who had come to watch justice be served. The Crown prosecutors presented overwhelming evidence. Financial records showing embezzlement, testimony from 43 women, eyewitness accounts of the attempted murder. William's lawyers tried to mount a defense, but there was nothing they could do. The evidence was irrefutable. On the third day, the jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Guilty on all counts. William's face went white. Lady Ashford fainted in the gallery. Lord Ashford simply sat there, looking like a man who'd aged 20 years in 3 days. The judge's sentence was harsh, 20 years in prison for the attempted murder, additional time for the embezzlement and assault charges. William would be nearly 60 before he saw freedom again. As the guards led him away, William looked back at Lillian one last time. His expression was pure hatred. She met his eyes steadily and felt nothing. Not triumph, not satisfaction, not even pity, just a calm certainty that justice had been done. Outside the courthouse, the crowd of supporters had grown to nearly 1,000. When Lillian emerged, they erupted in cheers. Margaret stood on the courthouse steps, raising her hands for quiet. Today, we have seen justice served, but our work is not finished. This is only the beginning of a larger fight, a fight for every woman's right to safety, dignity, and respect. We will not stop until the laws are changed, until the systems that protected men like William Ashford are dismantled, until no woman has to choose between silence and ruin. The crowd roared its approval. Lillian stepped forward to join her. I want to thank every woman who found the courage to speak. Every testimony mattered, every voice counted. Together, we proved that silence is not our only option, that we can fight back, that we can win. More cheers, louder now. And I want to announce the formation of the Women's Protection League, Lillian continued, an organization dedicated to legal reform, victim support, and holding powerful men accountable. We're opening offices in London next week, and we're looking for volunteers, lawyers, advocates, organizers, anyone who believes women deserve better. Elizabeth Worthington stepped up beside her. We're also establishing a fund to support women who've lost their positions or reputations because they refuse to accept harassment. No woman should have to choose between safety and survival. Rebecca Hartwell joined them. And we're creating a registry of employers who've been credibly accused of assault. No more allowing predators to move from household to household, position to position, leaving victims in their wake. One by one, the women who had testified stood together on the courthouse steps, a united front of survivors who had become activists. The journalists scribbled furiously, capturing every word. Later that evening, at a private dinner at Adrian's estate, Lillian sat surrounded by her closest allies, Margaret, Elizabeth, Rebecca, and a dozen other women who had become her friends and comrades. "To justice," Margaret said, raising her glass. "To courage," Elizabeth added. "To the future," Lillian finished. They drank, and Lillian felt the weight of the past weeks finally lifting from her shoulders. They had done it. They had taken on one of the most powerful families in London and won. But more than that, they had started something that would outlast all of them. Adrian clinked his glass to get everyone's attention. "Before this evening ends, Lillian and I have an announcement." He took her hand, and she felt her heart swell with love and certainty. "We're engaged," Lillian said simply. "And before anyone asks, this isn't strategy or convenience. This is two people who found each other in the middle of a battle and decided to keep fighting together." The room erupted in congratulations, Margaret laughing with delight, Elizabeth wiping away happy tears. "Finally," Margaret said, "I was wondering how long you two would pretend this was purely tactical." "We were being tactical," Adrian protested. "Darling, no one spends that much time staring at someone they're only tactically allied with," Margaret said dryly. "I'm just glad you both finally admitted it." As the celebration continued around her, Lillian stepped out onto the terrace for a moment of quiet. The London night spread out before her, the city glittering with gaslight and possibility. 3 weeks ago, she'd stood in a ballroom watching her life collapse. She'd felt powerless, disposable, worthless. Now she stood on the edge of something enormous, a movement, a future, a life she'd chosen for herself. Adrian joined her, slipping an arm around her waist. "What are you thinking?" "That I'm grateful for everything that happened, even the terrible parts, because it led me here, to this moment, to you, to purpose." "Do you regret anything?" She considered the question seriously. "I regret that others were hurt. I regret that it took so long for William to face consequences, but I don't regret fighting back. I don't regret refusing to accept what everyone said was inevitable." "Good, because I have a feeling you're going to spend the rest of your life refusing to accept the inevitable. Is that a problem?" "Not even slightly." He turned her to face him. "I wouldn't change a single thing about you." She kissed him then, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they returned inside, the party was in full swing. Someone had started playing the piano, and several of the younger women were dancing, their laughter filling the room with joy. Lillian's mother appeared at her elbow, looking uncertain. "May I speak with you?" They stepped into a quiet corner. Her mother took both her hands. "I've been thinking about what you said, about choices, and I've made one." "What kind of choice?" "I'm leaving your father, not dramatically. I'm not going to create a scandal. But I'm taking your sisters and moving to the country house. We'll live there, and I'll make sure they grow up knowing they don't have to settle for men who don't respect them." Lillian's eyes filled with tears. "Mama, you showed me it was possible to choose myself, to demand better." Her mother's voice wavered. "I'm 45 years old, and I'm finally going to find out who I am when I'm not just someone's wife." They embraced, both crying now, years of complicated feelings crystallizing into this single moment of understanding. "I'm proud of you," Lillian whispered. "I'm proud of you too. You're going to change the world, my darling girl. I know it." 6 months later, Lillian stood in Westminster Cathedral in a gown of ivory silk, her hand clasped in Adrian's, speaking vows that promised partnership, equality, and mutual respect. The church was packed with everyone who mattered, not just society's elite, but the women who had fought beside her. Elizabeth and Rebecca stood as her bridesmaids, Margaret as her matron of honor. The pews were filled with members of the Women's Protection League wearing purple ribbons in solidarity. When the ceremony concluded and they walked back down the aisle as Duke and Duchess of Ashford, Lillian felt the weight of history shifting, Not just her own history, but something larger. Outside, a crowd of thousands had gathered. When they emerged from the cathedral, cheers erupted. "Speech!" someone shouted. "Give us a speech!" Adrian looked at her, eyebrows raised. She nodded. 6 months ago, she called out, her voice carrying over the crowd, I was a woman with no choices. Today I'm a woman with all the choices in the world. That didn't happen because I'm special or extraordinary. It happened because I refused to accept that silence was my only option, and because extraordinary women stood beside me and refused to let me fight alone. She paused, looking at the sea of faces. Every single one of you has power, the power to speak, the power to stand up, the power to demand better. Use it. Don't wait for permission. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Just start. Speak your truth, fight your battles, and know that you're not alone. The crowd erupted in cheers so loud they echoed off the cathedral walls. As they climbed into the carriage that would take them to the wedding breakfast, Lillian looked back one last time at the crowd of women. Women who were already organizing, already fighting, already changing the world. "Ready for the next battle?" Adrian asked, taking her hand. "Always," she said. And she meant it. This was just the beginning. The Women's Protection League had already helped pass 2 new laws protecting victims of assault. They'd opened offices in 12 cities across England. They'd created a network of safe houses for women escaping dangerous situations. But there was so much more to do, so many battles to fight, so many women who still needed someone to stand up and say no more. As the carriage rolled through London's streets, past cheering crowds and waving supporters, Lillian thought about the girl she'd been 6 months ago. Terrified, desperate, convinced she had no power. That girl was gone. In her place was a woman who knew her own strength, who had learned that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. Adrian squeezed her hand. "What are you thinking about?" "The future. All the work we're going to do. All the lives we're going to change." "We? We? You think I'm letting you get out of this? You signed up for a partner who refuses to sit quietly. I hope you're prepared for a lifetime of activism, advocacy, and probably quite a lot of scandal." He laughed, the sound full and genuine. "I wouldn't have it any other way." The carriage turned onto the street where their new home waited. Not Adrian's bachelor estate, but a house they'd chosen together. One with offices on the ground floor for the Women's Protection League, living quarters above, and room for the family they hoped to build someday. A family that would grow up knowing that respect, equality, and justice weren't optional. That standing up for what's right mattered more than maintaining appearances. That silence in the face of wrong was its own kind of violence. As they stepped out of the carriage and into their new life, Lillian felt something settle in her chest. Not contentment. She'd never be content while there was injustice to fight. But certainty. Purpose. A bone-deep knowledge that she was exactly where she was meant to be, doing exactly what she was meant to do. The girl who'd been told she was powerless had discovered her power. The woman who'd been told to stay silent had found her voice. And the Duchess who'd been forged in fire and fear and defiance was going to use every ounce of her influence to make sure no woman ever had to fight the battles she'd fought alone. The work was just beginning. And Lillian Carter, now Duchess of Ashford, activist, advocate, and survivor, was ready. She had fought through betrayal, survived attempted murder, brought down a predator, and changed the laws of the land. And she was just getting started. Years later, when historians wrote about the beginning of the women's rights movement in England, they would point to this moment. To the night a woman refused to accept humiliation quietly, to the trial that exposed systemic abuse, to the Duchess who chose justice over silence. But Lillian knew the truth. It hadn't started with her. It had started with every woman who'd ever been told to stay quiet and had spoken anyway. Every victim who'd become a survivor. Every silent scream that had finally found its voice. She was just the one who'd refused to let that voice be silenced. And in that refusal, in that single act of defiance, she'd helped change the world. Not because she was special, but because she'd been brave enough to believe she could be. And that belief, that certainty that one person standing up could spark a revolution, that was her true legacy. That night, as London celebrated and planned and organized for the battles ahead, Lillian stood at the window of her new home with Adrian's arms around her, looking out at a city that would never be quite the same. No regrets? Adrian murmured against her hair. Not a single one, she said, and she meant it. Because sometimes the greatest victory isn't just winning the battle, it's becoming the person who is strong enough to fight it in the first place. Lillian had become that person, and she would spend the rest of her life making sure other women knew they could become that person too. The future stretched out before her, full of challenges and triumphs, setbacks and victories. But for the first time in her life, she faced it without fear. Because she'd learned the most important lesson of all: the only truly powerless person is the one who believes they have no power. And Lillian would never believe that again.